Sekeres Price, a special S&P Live NHL trade deadline show. We are less than 30 minutes before the National Hockey League's deadline to make trades, and the Vancouver Canucks thus far have been very quiet. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Grady Saz hitting switches and conducting things in the show, a presentation of Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood Nissan in Langley has the Nissan Leaf, one of the pioneers of the electric car revolution. Get one with up to $13,000 cash back, including rebates. Applewood Nissan in Langley. It's all good at Applewood.
We'll get to our Tim Hortons poll question, our top story by Mr. Lube, after 12 noon Pacific, when we know just exactly what the Canucks have or have not done today. As mentioned, very quiet and frankly, somewhat quiet across the league. Anticipate we'll get a flurry of deals here in the next 30 minutes. Just to let you know, we're going to be live here carrying through to about 1 p.m. or later, depending on when Patrick Alvine, Vancouver Canucks general manager, decides to speak. We're hearing that could be about 1 p.m. today. Jeff Patterson's going to join us from Rogers Arena. And look, it's shaping up as a day where the Vancouver Canucks, because of a lack of cap space, remember they have brought Carson Soucy back off LTIR, don't have the flexibility to do a whole lot. They have papered Vasily Podkolzin down to the minors. That makes him eligible for the Calder Cup playoffs with the Abbotsford Canucks. It creates a little bit of salary cap room, Blake, $1.09 million. And Dan Murphy on Sportsnet saying he thinks a top 9 forward is coming here. One would suspect that a Phil Kessel signing is coming here.
There's only room for the Phil Kessel signing right now, so they'll have to have a whatever deal on top of Kessel would have to be salary out, because that 1.09 is only going to take care of Phil Kessel. And I don't know that it's actually a papering of Vasily Podkolzin. We might have seen the last of Podkolzin for a while, depending on what they do with Kessel once he's under contract. So we'll see. Pods played okay again last night in the victory over Vegas. But lots of things up in the air right now for the Canucks.
Well, and it has to be disappointing for Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvine at this moment, because let's face it, they set their sights pretty high. If you were in on Jake Gensel and you were in on Tyler Toffoli and you were in on Jason Zucker, I mean, you're right now, if it's just a rental, is that Barabanov in San Jose? Is that Pacioretty in Washington, Kubalik in Ottawa? Or can they somehow pull a rabbit out of the hat here on a winger with term, whether that's Buchnevich in St. Louis, Vetrano from Anaheim, Jordan Greenway in Buffalo, Riley Smith in Pittsburgh.
Which is going to involve a roster player heading out. So again, that's in terms of people wanting to keep this team together and just add somebody. If any of those names you just mentioned there in that last list, if any of them become Vancouver Canucks, it means somebody's leaving the Vancouver Canucks because they're going to need salary cap space going the other way.
Well, and it would appear as though Ilya Mikheyev and his $4.25 million salary is part of the problem right now.
Yeah, for sure it is.
Declining player who has not scored in 30-plus games, who, would otherwise be the solution if he was playing to the reputation and to the contract. Alas, he's not. You can't really get away with him in the top 9 right now, at least not when you take a look at rosters side by side, the Canucks versus Edmonton versus Vegas, let alone versus those fantastic teams in the Central, Colorado and Dallas. So let's just go through this a little bit, Blake. Last night, the Thursday night, the deal goes down for Gensel, the big deadline prize. The Carolina Hurricanes are the acquiring team. They get defenseman Ty Smith with them, a one-time first-round pick. It cost them Michael Bunting, who's a good NHL player. It costs them 3 prospects. All of them have some pedigree. All of them have a little bit of success in the minor leagues. A second-round pick that can become a first if Carolina advances to the Stanley Cup final, and a 5th-round pick if, in fact, the Hurricanes win the Stanley Cup. So you take...
Matt, I'll stop you right now. If you had hoped that Matt Dumba might be part of a Vancouver Canuck edition, he's on his way to Tampa Bay. Another one off the board.
Matt Dumba, one of the right shot I was going to get to the right shot defenseman here in a moment, because we've seen some of them go as well. Needless to say, the price on Gensel was big. And I'm not sure that Vancouver could have topped what Pittsburgh wound up getting here because, I mean, they got at the very worst, a middle six NHL winger in Bunting. So that's probably Höglander for the Canucks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then you'd have to fill in with 2 to 3 prospects and a second with the possibility of it being a first. Boy, to make that deal after you make the Elias Lindholm deal would have been very, very difficult. And who knows? We may well be looking back going, they decided to go Lindholm early as opposed to Gensel late. And that was the difference in their playoff success.
And the truth of the matter is, the Canucks are challenging for a President's Trophy here. Not that that's an accomplishment. I'm just saying they're at the top of the league. The other teams are below them right now, looking to be where the Canucks are. The Canucks, by virtue of wins and losses, would seem to have a few fewer holes than some of the other teams that are now trying to add. So it stands to reason that if any team could stand pat, it would be the first or second place team in the National Hockey League.
Well, it stands to reason, except their management went out and tried to make these moves. So management was not intending to stand pat.
No.
If you hear anything later today about, we were happy with our team, we just decided to stand pat. Well, that doesn't align with the reporting.
No, there was efforting. There was efforting.
Activities. They have been known as one of the most aggressive teams on the trade market. Patrick Alvine himself has made more trades than any GM this year and was getting plaudits for it around the league and in the market. They've done a magnificent job with this team this year. But as we stand here 20 minutes to the deadline, it looks like they're going to fall a little short in terms of getting the level of player they hope to get.
Cap space is unbelievable. Like the Zucker trade was a 6th round pick.
Yes. And it was a 6th round pick because Nashville took the whole salary on, did not require Arizona to retain. And of course, Arizona, team with financial troubles, did not want to retain.
But they're barely at the floor. It's an expiring contract. It's not that big a chore for them.
If you had the cap space, you absolutely would have beaten a 6th round pick for Zucker.
It turns out the Dumba trade's the exact same. It's actually less. It's a pick swap in the late rounds.
Wow.
So if Arizona just deleted guys from the roster.
So Tampa and Nashville obviously were very aware that Arizona did not want to retain money, had financial troubles, had them over a barrel, exerted that leverage, and got acquisition, nice players. I'm not sure they're game changers.
I'm not beating down a path to get these players, but when they're free, effectively free, you take them on if you had the cap space.
Tyler Toffoli was not free. He goes from the New Jersey Devils to the Winnipeg Jets with 50% retention. The Devils had all sorts of LTI space, so we're able to absorb some salary, and they get a 2nd round pick in 2025. They get a 3rd round pick in 2024. I saw you tweeted about that. 2 seconds for Toffoli. Should the Canucks have done that?
Here's the problem with the 2 seconds, as I see it, is they are 25 and 26 seconds. Remember, there's no 24th second for the Vancouver Canucks. The Devils are not in rebuild mode.
Well, no,
they're not. They're looking for a couple of pieces to add so that they are a definite playoff team next year. Now, the Jake Allen acquisition notwithstanding. But a 2nd round pick in 2026, I mean, they want something that's going to help them a little bit closer to now. My question would be 1 pick. If you gave them the 2025 first, could you stomach that? Is that overpayment?
It's definitely overpayment given what Mantha and Tarasenko went for.
Yeah.
I don't think Toffoli is that much better than those guys.
Now, if you made them take Mikheyev, if you said, we'll give you the first,
that's a different
but
matter.
You got to take Mikheyev, would that have done it? Maybe not. We're not in the room with Tom Fitzgerald and knowing what his wants are, but the 2026 second might have just been too far out for the Devils to want.
Kyle Oposo from Buffalo, the captain of the Sabres, goes down to Florida to join Tarasenko. He goes for an AHL defenseman and a 7th round pick. We had talked a little bit about Patrick Maroon and Eric Johnson, those uber leaders, veterans, Stanley Cup playoff guys. Both of them get moved today. Johnson goes to Philly for a 4th round pick. Maroon goes to the Boston Bruins for an AHL winger and a conditional 6th round pick. Oposo down to Florida for the 7th and the AHL defenseman. And there was two others I wanted to get to. Andrew Peeke, right shot defenseman with term from the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's on his way to Boston as well. One-time first-round pick Jakub Zaboral is the part of the return there. I'm not sure we have the full return on that. Do we, Blake? Oh, yeah. Zaboral and a 2027 third-round pick for Peeke. He's 275, and he's under contract for 2 more years. Now, some people have no use for him. Some people think he's a fine third pair right shot defenseman. And then the other right shot defenseman to go, Grady's boy, Chad Ruhwedel from the Pittsburgh Penguins. I told you we'd get to him today, to the New York Rangers for a 2027 4th-round pick. So those are the sorts of players in the Canucks orbit. Throw Dumba onto the pile of the right shot defenseman. And so far, swings and misses from the Vancouver Canucks.
Now, there's 2 reasons why the Canucks haven't, to this point, been able to pull off a deal. We've covered the cap space issue. None of that. There is a way that you can wiggle yourself out of that issue, and that is pay to get out of that issue with a top prospect or pick. And the Canucks have been unwilling to deal their bells of the ball, and that is, of course, Jonathan Lekramaki, MVP of his team Orebro yesterday. That is Tom Wielander at Boston University, and that is DPD, Elias Pettersson, who is on his way to Abbotsford.
Yes, according to Rick Dollywall. So
at the end of this season, he'll finish up, and he won't be eligible for the playoffs. He's not on the roster today. He has to be on the roster today, but he can get some games in with the AHL Abbotsford team, and that'll be an interesting look-see. Maybe there's time for Lekramaki to do the same. But that's an interesting little tidbit here as we approach the end of the season. And make no mistake, those 3 are in a category unto themselves. This team, and it's funny that there's clearly some messaging going out from some sources, because I was told the same thing, that this team is almost as high on Pettersson now as they are on the likes of Wielander and Lekramaki. The 3 of them are on the same tier in terms of what the organization thinks of them.
Join us live March 13th, Park Casino, the official casino resort of the Vancouver Canucks. We'll be at BC Kitchen doing a live show from 6 to 7 p.m. in advance of the game against Colorado. You get 15% off the game day menu at BC Kitchen with your game day ticket. Park's just steps away from Rogers Arena. You can sign up for Encore Rewards, get $10 free play at the Canucks Gaming Corner. Blake brought it up earlier in the week.
But just before you get that, Dumba's official price, Dumba and a 7th. For Tampa's 5th. How much?
You move up a couple same year, the draft?
Sorry. Dumba and a 7th in 2025 for a 2027 5th. Didn't know we were doing that.
So you got to wait on. Yeah. You can trade picks that far down.
Yeah.
Brought it up earlier in the week. Need to bring it up again, particularly given what Vegas has done with adding Mantha, with adding Hannafin, with the LTIR space created by Mark Stone. Should they have just put Tyler Myers on LTIR and say, Tyler, we'll hope to get you in a little before the playoffs if cap space allows, see if you have an injury between now and then that allows it. Basically, put Myers under heat lamps on the side and use that LTIR cushion that his big salary would have afforded them.
I wouldn't have had an issue with it. I'm sure Tyler Myers would have had an issue with it. I would be interested to know what
how the game is played, though. Now, Price.
Let's ask our fans. You can get immediate feedback on Twitter and on YouTube on this. Would you have, given the dirty pool? I mean, wink, wink, dirty pool being played by other teams in the National Hockey League. I mean, again, the Canucks have played more games than anybody else in the National Hockey League. So it's not as big an ask of Tyler Myers as it is for other teams that have over 20 games remaining here. Canucks are down to 17 left. It would mean at minimum he has to sit until the game against the Kings on March 25th. That's if they have another injury that allows him to get back in.
You would have had to have had the space to bring him back. But what you do is you sit there and you await another injury. And if that injury comes about, then you can take him off and put the injured player.
See Salo Edler.
It just so happened. Salo was ready to go.
Yeah, immediately.
The minute that Edler got hurt.
Yeah.
Wow. How about that? So look, I know we're talking hindsight here. Alas, I think that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about for the rest of the season. The other hindsight one, should they have moved on Mikheyev earlier? Like, they let it get to the point where he looks like an anchor. I was still holding out hope that, maybe there were some teams out there.
That's it. I think you just answered it. I think they believed the same thing. I think they just didn't believe that it was possible.
Mikheyev would be that bad for that long.
And I think they had reason to believe it. He was on half of a knee last year in the first half before he left.
And looked better.
He was fine. He was totally fine.
Looked better than what we've seen here.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So I think those will be the recriminations if the Canucks don't get a whole lot done here. We're now close to 10 minutes remaining until the Canucks and the rest of the league close up for business, at least on the trade side of things. Still, look, there was a lot of smoke about Pavel Buchnevich in St. Louis, about Frank Vatrano in Anaheim, less so about Jordan Greenway in Buffalo and Riley Smith in Pittsburgh. But as we sit here now, do you suspect that all four of those guys are going to stay put in their? Do you see players with term moving here in the final 10 minutes? I put that out there just because that's a more difficult calculation for a GM than a pure rental.
Sure.
And, to take it to the last minute, it would be understandable because you have to have a long think on that, talk to your scouts when you're moving out a player with term.
Yeah, they're nice to do's, they're not need to do's because, Frank Vatrano's not a 32-year-old veteran that Anaheim's thinking, oh, this doesn't fit into our rebuild. No, you can convince yourself that he can stay put and be a part of what you're doing next year. Buchnevich, same sort of thing. I mean, I think you can wrap your head. I mean, given the way he's playing this year, I don't think it's punishment to have him around next year for the St. Louis Blues. So they are nice to do's. You have to really blow them away, I think, to pull off a trade like that. And considering, again, as we said off the top here, the Canucks are going to need to likely include Mikheyev in that deal. So you're going to have to convince them of that. It's hard for the Canucks to pull off that deal. A little less hard for other teams, perhaps. Some late deals here. Jack Roslovic from CBJ to the Rangers for a mid-round pick in 2026. Thanks to our own Frank Saravalli for that one. Don't know that I would have had a ton of faith in Jack Roslovic. He has been an underachiever everywhere he's gone. And Ren Lavoisier and Max Pacioretty is staying in Washington.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's Roslovic is another potential candidate, though. That's a winger who can play, has played some center.
Yeah.
Look, in terms of teams that have been active, boy, the Carolina Hurricanes not only making the Jay Gensel trade, but then getting up this morning and trading for Evgeny Kuznetsov out of Washington, cost them a third-round pick in 2025, 50% retained there by the Capitals.
And that's why, by the way, they didn't claim him on waivers. Yes, right. He was available for free. They didn't want to pay the freight.
They didn't want to pay the entirety of the freight.
Yeah.
He's a player who's had problems, has just gotten out of the NHLPA assistance program. Clearly, the Washington Capitals were done with Kuznetsov. But Carolina, a team that does business a little bit differently. They're not about rentals as much. They anticipate they're going to re-sign Jake Gensel and so the price they pay there is going to be for a player long-term, not a pure rental. At least that's how they see it. Kuznetsov has a year remaining on his contract as well. Of course, Stanley Cup winner, had a sensational Stanley Cup playoffs when Washington won the Cup back in 2018. A team that has needed offense, has been lacking offense at the appropriate moment because they've gone on playoff runs. Don Waddell really going about shoring that up with these two players. We'll see how much or if Kuznetsov has a lot left, but Gensel is certainly going to help. You got to like Florida adding Oposo, given that it didn't cost them much, and that's a character player who's a team captain elsewhere. And, Boston, peak and maroon, Bruins-style players. They know their identity there in Beantown.
Yeah, they do. And it just, again, I can see fans probably frustrated. Like the Bruins every year seem to be able to make moves. Mm-hmm. Vegas able, it is frustrating at times. Now, again, it has to be underscored. The Canucks have made remember the first half of the season, we applauded the Canucks for making the only trades happen.
And they made the biggest trade going until Gensel with the Lindholm deal.
Yeah, and the addition of Zadorov, and the Canucks have been active this season, improving their team on the fly rather than waiting for deadline prices and deadline frenzy. So I mean that's not a cop-out, Matt. Like it is a real thing. We talked about Jim Rutherford being an early participant in the trade market, and he was
not a cop-out, but also still a failure if you don't get anything done, right?
Well,
like because you absolutely tried. Every insider was out there talking about Vancouver on Gensel, on Toffoli, on Zucker. You're 0 for 3 there.
I'll be surprised if they don't add even a depth player.
I would have to think a depth player is coming here in the next 10
and maybe that's just Kessel. Like that's in their back pocket. They're going to need room if they want to do Kessel plus. Again, they need to be creative.
The day he was found at YVR by Canucks Twitter, we said it then. Is there a world where they do nothing from here on out and say Phil Kessel is our deadline addition? Blake, we are 6 minutes away from Phil Kessel
that being the case.
Our deadline addition. Coming off a victory against those Golden Knights in Sin City. Ho-hum, Canucks sweep another road trip. They win at 3-1 against a Knights team that did have Anthony Mantha in the lineup, did not have Noah Hannafin in the lineup. Quinn Hughes with his 13th goal of the season. It comes on the power play. Elias Lindholm gets an assist. So
can the Vegas Golden Knights flip the switch? Because they were not good last night.
No,
they have not been good. They've lost 4 straight. They've got 2 wins in 10. That is not the Vegas Golden Knights that used to strike fear in the hearts.
No, Mark Stone missing. He's a big part of their hockey club. And the other thing about the Canucks, was the first 8 shots of the game, 10-1 early. I mean, they were ready to play.
First 40 minutes, they
outshot them 31-17 in the first 40 minutes.
And I think the only time we saw Vegas pushback was just some score effects happening a little bit. But it's a really nice road trip, 3-0. We said at least 3-1 this week just to get their footing back, and now they'll be at least 3-1 this week.
I'll say this though, Vegas, when they get Stone back, that's going to be an explosive hockey club. And speaking of explosions, a special shout out and thank you to TSN's Farhan Lalji. Our studio has a faint beer odor.
It's our favorite beer, though.
I think it's a Yellow Dog.
Yeah.
What was it? A Play Dead IPA?
Probably, yeah.
So Jeff Patterson, Irf Gafar in here in the Go-Goats Sports Studio last night doing rink-wide Vancouver.
Farhan shotgun.
Farhan decides to come on down and join them because he's staying here at Wall Center to get up early to do trade deadline, couldn't possibly drive in, cracks open a beer and showers the studio. J-Pat said, I have never seen an unshaken beer explode to that degree.
That's how fresh they are from Yellow Dog. So fresh.
So shout out Farhan.
Yeah.
We hope you're not playing hurt today. Of course, you got more beer on the studio than you got in your mouth.
Unfortunately, Rug Doctor is not one of our sponsors, so it'll be on us.
Yes, someone is going to have to shampoo this rug.
A lot of different smells in the studio today.
Wow, yeah.
Nice variants. Tim Hortons, coffee, darts, farts.
You see, this is our deadline filler. We're talking about the odor in the studio. Thank you for that.
It's some air conditioning.
Well, thank you.
Grady Sass. Boy, would you say at this stage, again, trades can come in after 12 noon, everybody. And so we may very well just see a big queue at Central Registry, and we'll be announcing deals well past noon. But as it stands right now, Blake, I got to say this is a little underwhelming as the deadlines go. I know a lot of the big trades happened earlier, but I did wonder whether some of these players with term would be moved, and unless something goes down here very quickly, it doesn't look like a lot of guys.
Goodness.
We have a trade to announce, and it's a big one.
The Bob Father.
Off the top.
With a pending trade call, Vegas acquiring Thomas Hertl.
Oh, wow.
From San Jose.
Oh, boy.
Oh, Mount Sekeres is bubbling.
What's he making? Like $9 million, and they got room for him?
What do they send? But there has to be some content going back, doesn't it, at this point? And Colin Miller to the Jets as per
That's
Darren
a
Dreger.
right shot defenseman as well that you wondered, would he make sense for the Canucks?
Who's playing on the bottom half
depth
rosters
guy?
of the NHL right now?
Mhm.
Did 20th through 32nd in the NHL just turn into the American Hockey League? Like,
Mhm.
who's playing on those teams?
Blake, Thomas Hurdle is under contract for $8.137 million, and he's under contract until the end of the 29-30 season. So,
So somebody's going the other way.
yeah.
They have to be.
Oh, for sure. He's an assistant captain or an alternate captain with the San Jose
That's
Sharks.
got to be a hockey
He's
trade.
30 years old. Big boy. Quite a track record, too.
Oh, my goodness.
Of course, he once scored 4 goals. You might
He
remember.
did, yeah. Like, is that Barbashev going the other way? Like, they got to be sending
I
somebody.
would have to think it's something of substance.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not the player this year that he has been in the past, but of course, it's a very weak hockey club. This year, he's twice been a 30-goal guy, and he's crested 70 points in his career, coming off 63 last year. So, yeah, Vegas is at it again.
He's
such a great story, huh? Such a great story. Remember when we say that about the Golden Knights? Yeah, what a great story. They're competitive in their expansion year.
Rabbits out
Not
of
a great
hats.
story.
Rabbits out of hats. It's
all right.
Unbelievable.
We're coming up to the top of the hour here. We're going to reset. But as it stands right now, Vancouver, very, very quiet. In
Lightning
fact,
quick break, and we're back with the post-deadline coverage.
Mm-hmm. Park is the official casino resort of the Vancouver Canucks, and Sekeres Price, we're heading there. Yeah, March 13th. Join us for a live show at BC Kitchen in advance of the game against Colorado. You get 15% off the game day menu at BC Kitchen with a game ticket, $6 happy hour specials at Center Bar Park, just steps away from Rogers Arena. We'll see you on March 13th.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Sekeres Price for Friday, March 8th, 2024, coming to you from the Go-Go Sports Studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. You're heading to a game or an event downtown, make it a staycation. Call the Wall, 604-331-1000. Ask for the Sekeres Price rate. Some blackout dates apply. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Grady Sass, hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up on NHL trade deadline day, and it's a presentation of Applewood Auto.
Can I tell you about what Applewood Nissan in Langley has got for you? Like the 2023 Nissan Qashqais. They're taking up space. They would like them to leave, so they're giving you financing from 2.99% for up to 36 months. Head on over. Applewood Nissan in Langley. It's all good at Applewood. We will get to our Tim Hortons poll question once we figure out whether the Vancouver Canucks have done anything here on the final day to make trades in the 23-24 National Hockey League season. But for the moment, our top story brought to you by Mr. Lube. Capped out, missed out. Jake Gensel, Tyler Toffoli, Jason Zucker, all wingers tied to the Vancouver Canucks. All of them move over the last 24 hours, and the Canucks don't get any of them. They weren't playing with a lot of cap space. In fact, we're down to $125,000 before sending Vasily Podkolzin down to the minors. That got them up to just under $1.1 million, but that's not a lot of space. It was going to require brokerage or retention, makes it more difficult to consummate a trade. And here they are, Blake, missing out on some of their trade targets and carrying Ilya Mikheyev and the $4.25 million salary for a player who has gone nearly a half season here without a goal and has slumped miserably in his second season with Vancouver. And cap space just generally, yeah, it's a good thing to have and can make life a whole lot easier on you. But if you want to point a finger, I'm not asking people to pile on personally on Ilya Mikheyev, but if Ilya Mikheyev is having an Ilya Mikheyev season and he's at 16 goals on the season, 17 goals on the season, I think teams are happily taking Ilya Mikheyev back in a trade as compensation for salary, allowing the Canucks to pull off trades for guys that have bigger cap hits without the cap space per se. But him in his current condition, it's not a possibility. It takes a heavy sweetener, I think, to make that happen. And as such, the Vancouver Canucks are on the outside looking in, maybe nibbling at the edges here in the post-mortem of the deadline, if at all, pulling off any deals. So it is a rather quiet day here on the deadline for the Vancouver Canucks. That's our top story, brought to you by Mr. Lube, 100% Canadian, warranty-approved oil changes with no appointments necessary, of course. And now, of course, for tires, that's service and sales, you also don't need an appointment. 16 locations in the Lower Mainland. For one near you, go to mrlube.com.
I mean, the Canucks are the best team in the Western Conference, the second best team in the league. They didn't need an oil change, but maybe a tire rotation.
Just a rotate.
a
Move
little
them around. Move them around
a little bit.
Didn't happen.
And we should note Thomas Drance just tweeted, Canucks are done for the day. I'm told no moves and did not sign Phil Kessel.
Whoa.
Nothing.
Nada.
Not a single solitary thing.
Patrick Alvine is going to talk to the people at 12:30, so we're only 25 minutes away from that. It will be an interesting media conference. What is there to say, ultimately? I mean, even the unwillingness to sign Phil Kessel, there has to be a report from them that they received from their people that just said he's just not going to be worth the roster spot at this point. We're better off with Ilya or with Vasily Podkolzin.
Right. Alvine at 12:30. Jeff Patterson will join us after that when we hear, by way of explanation, why the Canucks didn't do anything, by the sounds of it. I got to say, Jim Rutherford, known as one of the most aggressive managers out there. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we began this week talking about things like potentially Myers on LTIR and creating more cap space. We were talking this week about moving on from Elias Lindholm in a three-way trade with Boston to try and land Jake Gensel, the biggest trade deadline prize out there, at least amongst the forward group. We were talking about Tyler Toffoli, who leads his team in goals, the New Jersey Devils, and that's quite a darn good offensive team. So, former Canuck, former Stanley Cup champion, of course. I mean, even Jason Zucker, who's got some pedigree and is a top 9 NHL forward, to come away with nothing. They got to be mightily disappointed at Rogers Arena. I know you say they've made the most trades and they did all their heavy lifting earlier in the season. Fair enough. Point taken. All true. But in the dying hours here, with a club that's playing good hockey again, last 3 nights, all wins, beat the Kings, beat the Ducks, beat Vegas, getting back to that play without the puck. We'll hear from Coach Tocchet a little later in the show. But to not do anything, to not add anything when you have this good a team and maybe your best window or your best shot coming over the next few years, because let's remember, Pettersson goes up to $11.6 million next year. Oliver Ekman-Larsson takes a bigger bite out of your cap space next year. You still got to sign Philip Hronek, and he's going to be more costly. Boy, you add it all up, I think this has to be quite disappointing for Canucks fans.
And the teams around them certainly improving throughout the course of the week. A quieter day for their immediate enemies in the Western Conference today, although the big Thomas Hertl trade for the Vegas Golden Knights, of course, which is, as of this moment, it sounds like multiple first-round picks for the Vegas Golden Knights headed to the San Jose Sharks. I'm going to guess they still need a little bit of salary cap help, so we'll see what the warm body is.
Well, he's $8 million, so one would have to think.
Yeah. So we'll see, but nothing new today from the Kings or Oilers at last check. It is. I am surprised they didn't use the $1.09 million that they had at their disposal with the Vasily Podkolzin demotion.
Would have thought at least a depth winger or a depth defenseman here.
Yeah.
Given that space. Okay. Well, let's unveil our Tim Hortons poll question here. Are you disappointed the Canucks were so quiet at NHL trade deadline. You can vote yes or no at Sekeres Price on Twitter and on YouTube. And our friends at Tim Hortons, of course, roll up to win. It's here for their 60th anniversary. You play on the Tim's app to win prizes. Daily cash jackpot of $10,000. You can win the all-electric Volkswagen ID4 sun-soaked Hilton getaway. Download the Tim's app. Roll up is on until March 31st. Answer me the poll. You disappointed?
I'm disappointed there's not something. Yeah. Like I think if Phil Kessel got signed, I think it would be something. And I don't think Phil Kessel would have really contributed much, but it would have been a in case of emergency break glass thing at the very least.
I think the other reason why it's disappointing is, and you had mentioned this several times here over the last few weeks, being back in the buyer side on trade deadline. We've seen them sell for so many years here. I mean, with the exception of the 19-20 season when they added Toffoli, they haven't been buyers very often over the last decade. So, to be back in that role with the Western Conference leading club and not add anyone, boy, kind of a downer. I got to say, I was looking forward to an afternoon of, breaking down the trade. I was looking forward to an afternoon of sketching out line combinations and defense pairings and what do they look like next year and all of that. And status quo for the Vancouver
now
Canucks.
Here's and I'll just play.
Unless something,
I'll
are
play,
we
no,
100%?
They're done. I think
We're
they're
100% positive, are we?
Yeah, I think they're done.
And no Kessel for sure.
It's what it sounds like. I'll say this, and this could be devil's advocate. This could be me convincing myself of this, but they have three apples of their eye. Not in any particular order: Jonathan Lekramaki, Tom Wielander, and DPD Elias Pettersson, who's coming over to finish his season with the Abbotsford Canucks in a matter of days. It sounds like. Those players are going to be really integral for this team in the next 1 to 3 years. As Oliver Ekman-Larsson's contract gets a little bit more exorbitant, as Philip Hronek's and forward PD's contract explodes, and they also just could be really good players.
Forward PD.
FPD and DPD.
Let's just call him PD.
FPD sounds like I'm upset with him.
EPD and PD.
Yeah.
How about we stick with that? No, you're right, but they're not going to be important this year.
Nope. Nope.
And
they're rolling the dice that this is good enough.
You're in the Stanley Cup playoffs, just about assured at this stage. And the other thing is, it didn't have to be that level of player. Like it could have absolutely have been, as you say, a depth winger, a depth defenseman. Now, I suspect Patrick Alvine is going to tell us that, look, there were a lot of players out there that may well have been on the market, may well have been on the tips of people's tongues and on the tips of their fingers at the keyboard that they just weren't interested in, didn't think could make them better.
Yeah. Like they could have rolled the dice and they probably could have fit somehow, some way, guys like Kubalik and Olofsson, guys that aren't exactly high-end top six players, but have scored goals in bunches in years gone by and might have been an upgrade on a guy like Ilya Mikheyev. We've talked about him a lot. But they're not guarantees. I mean, I think we've seen a lot of trades where those kind of guys are acquired and they are just continuing on, being streaky and non-dependable.
So should we be prepared here for Patrick Alvine to say, well, we have Dakota Joshua coming back. We've been happy with goals. And like,
of course.
We hear that those are the trade deadline internal additions. Right.
Wow. I mean, that's a cop out.
I know it is. No,
but he may go to that trope, but it's a cop. But look, here's what has to happen now. First of all, Mikheyev has to somehow, some way find his game. And be a contributor for the Stanley Cup playoffs. You're right. Joshua has to come back and continue to play at the level, and he's been exceptional this year. Means you're probably going to need something out of PDG, if not Vasily Podkolzin in the playoffs, because you're probably going to lose a player, and that brings one of those guys up. Maybe it's Arshdeep Baines, but you're going to have to lean on guys who aren't necessarily proven NHL players or are having just absolutely disastrous season like Mikheyev in the playoffs. you're going to need Pius Suter to continue to be a decent top six winger for you. And you're going to need guys like Lafferty and Oman contributing on the fourth line. I know J-Pat, when we finally get to Jeff, and he'll be in here as soon as Patrick Alvine is done his press conference, he was talking a lot, Blake, about at the very least, you need to reformulate your fourth line and get some degree of identity. Okay, you missed on Gensel. You missed on Toffoli. You missed on Zucker. At least go out and get somebody that can give that fourth line more of an identity again, because that's something that had been lost. And Rick Dawkins said as much when they were struggling in February.
Do have details on the Hurdle trade for the Vegas Golden Knights. They are sending their 2025 first round pick, their first round pick from 2023, who is David Edstrom. The Sharks are retaining 17%, so Hurdle comes into Vegas at 6.75 for all of those years, though. And then 2/3, 1 in 25 and 1 in 27. I mean, that cost is, to me, not that great. David Edstrom is the 32nd overall pick. He's the last pick of the first round.
Yeah, he had a lot of helium towards the draft last year. He was looked at as like a third round pick, and then had a lot of helium. Big center, right shot, I believe, as well, although I stand to be.
He's playing in the SHL this year for Frölunda.
Is he a right shot? No, left shot.
Yeah. Modest return, 6 goals, 11 assists in 42 games.
Yeah, 6'2" centerman. I mean, it's 2 first-round picks and 2 firsts and 2 third-round picks. I mean, that's a fair bit of draft capital there. The 25, so that's this year's picks. It's going to be later. So
I still haven't seen anything about an additional player, though, headed the other way that counters the price. So you can think what you want of Vegas's play of late, but we still haven't seen Hannafin play with the team. We still haven't seen Hurdle play with the team, and they've got Mark Stone coming back at some point. So they will get better, you'd have to think. Now, and I'll say this about the Vancouver Canucks. There's criticism out there, certainly, and I think some of it's warranted about their depth going into the playoffs. They have turned it around nicely here. They are 4-1-1 in their last 6 games with no Dakota Joshua, with no Tyler Myers in the lineup. So they're not at full health right now. And maybe you can say that no team is ever at full health. The Canucks have actually had moments where they have been at full health. So they're using depth right now, the Canucks are, and they're getting by at the toughest time of the year as teams are ramping up towards the playoffs. So, hey, it's not ideal. I think they would have added more depth if they could, but cap strapped and such is life.
Again, our Tim Hortons poll question at Sekeres Price on YouTube and on Twitter. Are you disappointed the Canucks were so quiet at NHL trade deadline? Yes or no? Well, I guess the good news to talk about today is a 3-1 victory over the Vegas Golden Knights.
One that they dominated really till they needed to. A little bit of score effects towards the end of the game, but they held on nicely. They played 3 straight road games of sound defensive hockey, attack on the last home game. I mean, they're allowing a goal per game here, for heaven's sakes. And we haven't thought of this team as a defensive juggernaut, and they're certainly not scoring goals at the October-November rate. But Matt, might this team be a little bit better defensively than we've given them credit for all season long? Now, hey, Thatcher Demko's made a couple of brilliant saves in a couple of really big moments in the last couple of games. But you don't apologize for good goaltending. You pay this guy commensurate for his skill.
Let's hear from Thatcher Demko then, because he said the games, and I think this was evident against the Kings in Los Angeles earlier in the week, and now against Vegas. He's saying these games are feeling like playoff games. Here's Demko.
I feel like playoff games right now. So, it's going to be important that we can sustain this type of play pretty much for the rest of the year here. So these are big games for us, and good job by our group to produce and execute at a high level.
And head coach Rick Tocchet really likes the way they're playing right now, particularly their play without the puck. Take a listen.
Well, I think this is it's Canuck hockey. We like playing without the puck. I think we got back to our identity the last couple of games, 3 games here. I think we took 1 penalty each game, which is nice. So all the areas that we wanted to shore up, I got to give the guys credit. They shored it up. It's a tough building to play in. Didn't give them a lot. And then when we did, Denver was there for us.
Yep. And play without the puck and better discipline, two things that absolutely needed to improve after what was an uneven February. They're off to a fantastic start in March.
Which one of you said Hannafin did even play last night? Because he played, and you're getting called out in the chat right now. Did you even watch the
It
game?
was Blake.
Watching the spreadsheets again.
Oh, no, I said it too.
Yeah.
Oh,
We both said it.
Yeah.
shame.
I followed your lead. I'm blaming you.
Point the finger out.
I thought
not
you
in.
said it first.
Anyhow,
Oh, well.
they will.
Anyways, Hannafin and Mantha have played. Hurdle hasn't. I'm sure he'll be up next for Vegas. It's a hell of a team. Let's get to some comments from our listeners on the Tim Hortons poll question. Are you disappointed the Canucks were so quiet at trade deadline? Basketball, Phil, very Seattle Mariners-like. Very disappointed. Couldn't add
It
a
was
depth.
very
there.
Mariner-like,
Very
yeah.
Mariner-like. Bure's flow. Go all in with Lindholm, but don't do anything more. Bizarre. Got two AHL guys in the top six. Smoke City, and we're going to see some pushback now from Ostrich Canucks fans where the sky is always blue. They weren't quiet. They just got their work done well before the deadline. No cramming for this Canucks management group. Cole says, not surprised they made big moves, but I'm glad they didn't trade prospects. And Skilligan, no picks, no cap space, no surprise.
Yeah, I mean, they do have some picks, but it just wasn't going to be possible without paying to take somebody away, and then you got to pay for the commodity as well. So you're paying twice. You're double paying,
Or you're paying brokerage, which is also
it's also paying twice. So
some late deals coming in, trickling in. The Toronto Maple Leafs acquire forward Connor Dewar from the Minnesota Wild, but it looks like deadline kind of outside of the big Bobfather bomb on Hurdle.
and there's still, I don't think there's another warm body. I don't know how Vegas fits all these guys in. How is this
Well,
possible?
Martinez is going on LTIR. Is that not it? We talked about with Saravelli yesterday. He's got a broken bone in his foot.
Yeah, there's no news of him being there yet. He's, as
I'm
of
sure.
right now.
Yeah, I guess Vegas not only has Mark Stone on LTIR, but they had the ability to put like 4 other players on
Robin
LTIR.
Leonard, of course, lives there. And,
So
yeah.
there was a lot of flexibility for Kelly McCrimmon, George McPhee, former Canucks executive George McPhee, and the Vegas Golden Knights to add salary, add players in defense of their Stanley Cup championship. Are you guys now finally coming over to my side on ABV? Do you now not hate the Vegas Golden Knights and everything they stand for?
I mean, if you did,
And
it had nothing to
and
do
the-
with the expansion process.
Do you not hate the stain they have put on the league as a Johnny-come-lately cup winner? Stanley Cup parade was over and done within an hour. The plaza in front of the arena was quiet later that night. Residents complained about that. Do we really have to shut down the strip for the Stanley Cup parade? What is this hockey trophy? And why do we have to shut down our strip? Are you not seeing things like I am at this stage, Grady?
Don't hate the play, hate the game.
Oh, stop. Hate them both.
Yeah, I can.
You got plenty of room in your heart for hate. Anyways.
So Lachlan from Canucks Army, Lachlan Irvin,
Mhm.
he's saying is if we're sick of this,
What, the loading up on
and the other is the soft cap not just happening already? Like, should we just
like that's the thing.
soft cap the damn league?
Like we got a CBA coming up here in a couple of years.
Can you imagine
Can we
the furor over that?
can we just go to some sort of luxury tax system whereby if you have financial wherewithal as a hockey club, if you have the means, you have an owner who is willing to spend over and above what we're currently seeing cap levels, that you get to, maybe it costs you more money, right? You got to pay the luxury tax and just allow all this. I'm with Lachlan. I mean, because we effectively have. If it's we effectively it's not really a hard cap right now, the way it's being manipulated.
Okay.
And we've seen this with recent Stanley Cup champions. The other thing we're seeing with recent Stanley Cup champions, they're in no income tax jurisdictions. That's becoming a huge competitive advantage. Florida, Texas, Nevada.
So here's the secret on the Hurdle acquisition and why they can squeeze it in. He's injured. And by the time he's ready to be back, and they expect him back before the playoffs, by the time, of course, the LTIR space will build. His salary needed to be fit into the cap will be lessened with every passing day.
Yep.
And so those two streams will meet. The graphs will cross. Right. And by the time he's ready to come back, they will have accrued enough cap space to just slide him into the lineup. That's without even Alec Martinez being put onto LTIR.
Oh, so they could have done more, is what you're telling me.
Well, I think they're going to be nip and tuck when that happens, but it'll eventually happen. So that's the caginess of this trade for the Vegas Golden Knights and the San Jose Sharks, courtesy of Pierre LeBrun there. So
why are you smiling about this?
I mean, it's evil. It's honestly Dr. Evil level of stuff here from the Vegas Golden Knights. It really is.
It's Sharks with freaking laser beams.
You've got to respect it.
No, I don't respect it.
He put in the luge lessons. Like, let him. Honestly, this is great layer activity.
I've always said I'll give their management group and their players a lot of credit, but the absolute gift that keeps on giving, that stocking draft, the most generous we have ever seen for an expansion team in North American pro sports, and they continue to be able to milk that. An instant cup contender, if not dynasty, because their owner ponied up. He didn't even pony up as much as the Seattle Kraken guys ponied up. And then, of course, they didn't have to participate giving up a player to Seattle, even though that was a year delayed. Boy, Gary's golden child, the Vegas Golden Knights with one Stanley Cup. And I would suspect
but they're not in a club of one. Like other teams have done this.
Well,
like,
Tampa's done it too.
Tampa's done it too. If you want to make
they're in a club of one with the stocking draft, but yes.
If you want to draw any conclusions, like does Gary just let the southern markets do everything from Tampa to Arizona to Vegas? Like do the southern markets
get away with
whatever they want to do?
Arizona wants to play in a 5,000 seat arena.
Sure, go ahead. We're going to put a deadline at the end of January. Nah, okay, deadline's gone. Mm-hmm. Tell us when you can.
Yeah. Oh, Roberto, you're going to retire in Florida? Okay. Canucks cap recapture.
But nothing for Florida.
Right. Right. I said it on the show yesterday. I sure hope there's LTIR recapture penalties coming down the road with that new CBA. I got almost 0% chance of that. But that's what it would be like, given the Canucks were retroactively punished on the Luongo recapture. Totally legal contract when they signed it. New CBA, guess what? We're going to retroactively punish you. Yes, Grady.
Hot take. Despite all these moves, despite all the LTIR, which we call it exploitation, the Vegas Golden Knights missed the playoffs.
Oh, please.
Well, that would be sweet.
2-7-1.
I don't see how it's possible.
10.
I know,
delicious.
But I mean, with the late editions of Hurdle,
yeah.
I mean,
I don't believe it. I'm just throwing it out there.
But it would be, you know what?
It
would be enough for me to cheer on the Flames and the Kraken to make that happen. It would be, because that would be delicious.
Aiden Hill hasn't been as sharp.
I think St. Louis might be your best bet there, but
Kraken 7-2-1 in their last 10.
The Flames want to stick it to
the Flames have
still have
they still have Markstrom, but you lose Hanifin, you lose Tanev, you lose of course Lindholm.
Both Calgary and Seattle have winning records over the past 10 games. Let's go.
Yeah. Seattle re-signed Jordan Eberle today. So
no other deals.
If that was another if that was another winger off the board.
How about the Golden Knights?
Would have required retention or brokerage if in a Canucks vein. And Jersey tries to get Jacob Markstrom.
Settles for Jake Allen.
Yikes.
Yeah. Just what they need, another middling goaltender.
He says save percentage is .891 or 2.
But he's a veteran. He's a good presence for the young goalies.
It's a third-round pick to the Montreal Canadiens for Allen, and it upgrades to a second-round pick.
I don't get it.
If Allen plays in 40 or more games next season. and if the club qualifies for the playoffs with Allen on the roster. So
Golden Knights depth down the middle: Jack Eichel, William Karlsson, Thomas Hertl, Nicholas Waugh, Chandler Stevenson.
Yep.
They've got options.
Same like last year where Bluger was their fifth center, although it's even better by the sounds of it this year. Edmonton had cap troubles as well. And unless there's something late that comes in here.
No, they're done. Saravalli's
done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Oilers are also done. They were very quiet. They didn't do a single thing today either, right?
No, but they made the noise this week.
They made their noise with
the Kings.
With the trade with Anaheim, Carrick, and
Kings are rolling over. Kings are saying this is not our year. We're not investing in this year.
And they got Arvidsson coming
too.
back.
Yeah.
They did nothing too.
Yeah.
So you're telling me Vegas went out and in the last 48 hours got Noah Hannafin, Thomas Hertl, and Edmonton, Vancouver, and the Kings did nothing on trade deadline.
And you know what? Truthfully, I think that's a good move by Rob Blake, because if you're the Kings, why are you making a snap decision choosing from paltry goaltending options when you can go out in the summer and make a better, more intelligent goaltending choice without giving up assets? And they're not winning the cup this year. Like, that team's not winning the cup. They're not quite ready.
Mm-hmm. Edmonton, of course, making the moves for Sam Carrick and Adam Henrique from the Anaheim Ducks earlier in the week. Okay, so we're going to go to Rogers Arena for Patrick Alvine when he's ready to go. Grady, any indication that the podium is all set up there?
Nothing yet, but
Canucks
I will let you know.
General manager who, I mean, honestly, Rutherford and Alvine, on top of being aggressive, I just think they like to make trades. Like, I think they enjoy the exercise. You know, Rutherford over the course of his year has been known for that. I'm gonna guess you see some long faces that they're gonna try and put as positive a spin on this as possible, but I suspect you'll see some longer faces at Rogers Arena.
Why don't we take a break and come back with the news from Rogers Arena, and we'll have a chat with Jeff Patterson shortly thereafter as well. Canucks silent on deadline day as they watch teams around them continue to improve. We'll be back with all the audio from Rogers Arena.
Great Clips is the official hair salon of the National Hockey League. There are 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, all Canadian owned and operated. Download the app and find the nearest to you. When you're up next for a cut, you'll get a ready next text. Great Clips. It's going to be great. Park is the official casino resort of the Vancouver Canucks, and Sekeres Price, we're heading there. Yeah, March 13th. Join us for a live show at BC Kitchen in advance of the game against Colorado. You get 15% off the game day menu at BC Kitchen with a game ticket, $6 happy hour specials at Center Bar. Park, just steps away from Rogers Arena. We'll see you on March 13th. Sekeres Price, a special S&P Live NHL Trade Deadline edition. In a moment or two, we'll go to Rogers Arena where Patrick Alvine, Vancouver Canucks general manager, will speak. Jeff Patterson is going to join us thereafter. Our Canucks reporter from Rinkwide Vancouver will get his 2 cents on what didn't happen today. The Canucks did not make a trade. They did not sign Phil Kessel. Anyways, big show coming up, brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood GM in Port Hardy has the tough and ready Sierra 1500s. The 2024s as well. They have them for you. Get up to $6,500 in cash purchase credit, or you can finance them from 0% for up to 60 months. Give them a call at Applewood GM in Port Hardy. It's all good at Applewood.
How bad must Phil Kessel have looked that even on a day where you don't consummate a trade, or in a couple weeks where you don't consummate a trade for a forward, you say no on a guy who could at least play the position and potentially have helped you out somewhere down the road?
You wonder how that went down with the Kessel camp, and let's hope that Patrick Alvine addresses that to some degree, because I think people will, needless to say, have that question, whatever happened with the Kessel signing. But we're only going to hear that half of it. You'd love to hear the Kessel response. I mean, there's a 3% chance, Matt, that Phil Kessel said, you know what, my heart's not in this. I don't want to do this anymore.
And if that's the case, then, you know, so be it.
Yeah. I mean, you have to.
But I mean, the reports were even of yesterday. Their plan is to sign Phil Kessel. Well,
yeah,
didn't happen.
Nope.
So yeah, you wonder what happened there. Now, look, the one thing we'll say, and we talked about this week with John Shannon, as flashy as these Vegas Golden Knights moves are, rarely do you see players of that ilk come right in and become kingmakers. In fact, it's typically the teams that were really good beforehand who add a middle roster player that winds up making the difference. David Savard, the defenseman with the Tampa Bay Lightning several years ago. Josh Manson, good second pair defenseman, the Colorado Avalanche 2 years ago. Ivan Barbashev, good middle six forward for the Vegas Golden Knights last year. There are some of those caliber profiles of players who got moved here this week that I suspect will make a difference for their club. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be Vegas with the huge additions of a top pair defenseman like Hanifin, a top 6 or top 2 center like Thomas Hertl, and of course Anthony Mantha, who's having a very nice bounce back season, a big power forward who I suspect will play in their top 6 as well going forward.
Yeah.
Maybe it is Andrew Peak shoring things up for the Boston Bruins. Maybe it is
Colin Miller's trade to Winnipeg, something of that ilk. I mean,
yeah,
something around the edges.
Something, not the edges, more in the middle, but
middle edge.
Yeah, like not the meat in the sandwich, but maybe the cheese,
the 20 percentile, that far in.
Can you tell we're paddling here for Patrick Alvine? We got no freaking trades. We have no Phil Kessel signing, and now we have a tardy general manager at Rogers Arena.
We do. One final note on the game last night, though, as the Canucks win the 3rd straight on the road, and now 9-game homestand coming in. It looks like the Vancouver Canucks are both 4 points, 2 wins away from clinching this playoff berth, because the back end of the playoff bracket is going to be tough pressed to get to 93 points, and the Canucks are already at 89 points. Doing the math on the teams chasing down the Canucks, I think 109 is the number to possibly win the conference and almost certainly win the division. Because right now, with 21 games left, that's how many games the Oilers have left, and they are the only team that I think has a reasonable chance within the division to catch the Canucks. If the Oilers go 15-6, which is a hell of a clip, given they just got spanked by the Jackets last night, that only gets them to 108 points. The Canucks, to get to 109 points and be one better, would only need to go 10-7 in their 17 games the rest of the way. Nice clip, but nothing all world. So to me, 109 points, and they were trending at 115, 116 points there for a while. They don't need that. I really don't think so. I think 109 points will be the game. So count down 9-game homestand, and as I see it, they only need 10 more wins, and the Canucks will be at least division champs, if not conference champs.
And the first game of that 9-game homestand, Saturday at Rogers Arena against the Winnipeg Jets. And heard Tyler Toffoli interviewed earlier this morning, I believe it was on TSN. He thought he might just be picking up and meeting the team here in Vancouver. So the former Canuck may make his Winnipeg Jets debut against Vancouver. Winnipeg also adding Colin Miller, the right shot defenseman, today for a 4th-round pick. So Kevin Cheveldayoff, you'll remember, he made the deal for Sean Monahan shortly after the Vancouver Canucks added Elias Lindholm. That was the other early move. Felt it was very much a reaction to the Lindholm.
You'd already given up in some of those previous trades.
Yeah, I think that's something we're always looking into. And for us, and I said it before, it's just not, I'm actually trying to work every day, not just for the last day here. And I think that's where we always trying to be ahead of things, and even getting players in earlier so they have a chance to adjust. And we felt when we going back to before we started the season with Laffer to get some more speed in. Looking when we needed Sadorov, we were a little bit banged up there. And being an LTIR as well, we need to move in order to facilitate a trade for us. We need to move a player out to get a player in. So obviously that's that's a tougher situation than accruing cap space during the year. So.
Patrick, you mentioned a couple of forwards that have come up from Abbotsford and got a chance to play, but in the playoffs, you're likely going to need some depth on defense. What are you seeing down in Abbotsford for some defensemen that might be able to step up in that role?
Yeah, I think it was a good step in the right direction here for Brisebois. Very happy for him. He worked hard during the whole year, and for him to get medical cleared and be assigned to start playing down there. I think guys like Jetwu, McCord, Philip Johansson, they all improved during the year. We have good depth when we're healthy up here, but we know a playoff is a different animal. You need depth, and those guys have showed that they're capable to play games.
After all the trades you've made throughout the season, was today a little bit difficult to not make one for you?
Yeah, I guess you need another partner in order to make a deal. And as I said, we were in talking to teams that made their players available, but sometimes the fit is not there. And as I said, I didn't want to risk, and I feel that the group we have here and the team we have here have played so well together, and they continue to find ways to win games and continue to improve. So credit to the players.
Patrick, two of the teams that made some of the biggest and boldest moves are chasing you in the Pacific Division, Edmonton and Las Vegas. How much harder do you think the division is to win or get out of in the playoffs now than it was a week ago?
Oh, absolutely. Way harder. We all know that those teams were good to coming in there too. I think the West have shown that there is several teams that are capable to competing for a cup this year. And as we all said, every game is just going to get harder. That's the way it is. And I think it's a great learning experience for our young group here, where looking at the roster, there is not a lot of playoff experience. So every big game here in March, have you seen the growth in the players going through adversity, coming into this tough week and being able to only give up 3 goals on the road. I think that says a lot about the players and the coaches, how they work.
So, and this is maybe a question that we'll ask Rick tomorrow, but when the teams chasing you have made those kind of moves, what is the message to your team to just believe in where you are? How do you kind of counter that mindset that, they've made big changes and we're the same team that we were?
Yeah, but as I said, I trying to be ahead of things and trying to make the changes when it's needed and bringing in players earlier to adjust. We all know that it's going to take time for the adjustment, and some might not find the chemistry or not. That being said, we had tremendous respect for the other teams in our division. Nothing has really changed. We know how hard it is. We know how they played. We know how we need to play in order to have success. And I know the coaches are working on that to focus on our game and our way of hockey to play to be successful. And again, we've shown it up to this point. Are we pleased or satisfied? Not at all. I think there is another level, and I think our players are learning that as I said, going through the adversity here. So I'm excited for the game tomorrow.
Patrick, there was a thought coming into the last few days that this might be a buyer's market. There was a lot of wingers available, and some went at reasonable prices. A guy like Toffoli certainly comes to mind in this market. How involved were you on some of those potential players, and was the bigger issue cap space or just not wanting to part with assets?
As I said, we were involved in most of the players that were available. I don't know what you're referring to a lot. I don't think there was a lot of quality players available. And I think, as I said, the LTIR, the cap space is important, but when we set a roster in October, that's the number we have to work with. And as I said, the previous deals have been players going out and players are coming in, and that's the world we're operating in. it was definitely a big demand and ask for our younger players. And I didn't feel that in where we are, in the position where we are, that I wanted to give up the Wallinder, Lekkmäki, Pettersson, Radis, Sasson, Baines, Podkol, like those are the guys of the future here. And we feel strongly about those young players.
I know that Jim said in the last couple of days that top six forward was an area of need, and that's 6 weeks after Lindholm has been brought here. How do you address that over the course of the next few weeks before the playoffs and into the playoffs? Is there anything internally you can do, or are you just hoping certain guys hit a different level?
Yeah, I think that's where the coaches are working with the players. It's, as I said, we're going through a slump, we're going through adversity, and finding ways to get out of it. And I know the coaches are every day working on the individuals to get to the next level. But again, being pleased with watching Baines coming up here for games, watching Podkolzin, how he has improved and worked on the things that we asked him to work on. So those guys will definitely be in the mix here going down the stretch and competing for spots.
Patrick, signing Elias last week, did that change your planning for this week, knowing that now you sort of have a core set for several years, as opposed to not knowing that, what your team was going to look like beyond this year?
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, definitely with the projection of our roster moving forward, we know we're going to have some really good players on our team for the next at least 8 years. But that being said, that's where we know that there were a couple of intriguing players available, and we were in those discussions, and for whatever reason they didn't end up here. But we also weren't willing with parting ways with future assets or as I said, the young players that we have that we believe in can come in and help us here over the next couple of years.
And then Phil Kessel, you brought in, you took a look at him. In the end, you didn't sign him. What light can you shed on how that process went?
I think Phil is a great person and a well-respected player. What he has done in the league, a 3-time cup winner, wanted to come back to play. And as I said, with being an LTIR, roster complications and how we want to play, unfortunately, at this point, it wasn't a fit for us.
Patrick, given all of the moves you've made, and not just the in-season ones with Zadorov and Lindholm, but dating back even to Hronek and to Smith and on, did you feel it was important to hang on to what draft picks that you have, especially given how marketable prospect capital seemed to be at the deadline?
Yes, definitely. And also for us, we already parted ways with a lot of draft picks and leading up to this point. And as I said, we're sitting here with 89 points, and the players that have been on the roster and on the team leading up to this point have done a really good job, and they deserve to finish off here. But again, was it any chance for us to improve with a reasonable cost and not setting the future back? We definitely would have, look at it, but unfortunately, it didn't work this time.
I know you can't specifically discuss players on other teams or situations that may have cropped up over the last couple of weeks, but did the experience of bidding on some of the players that went earlier in the process, whether it was earlier this week or the week prior, impact you at all in deciding to be maybe a little bit more conservative based on the prices paid and what you'd sort of learned about how your own system was rated?
I think we over the last couple of weeks identified areas on our roster that if anything to improve on. I think we had that the feeling there. I think we played a couple of players higher up in the lineups than what we signed them for, but they've been great. So if there was any ways to strengthen, or as Jim pointed out, top six, absolutely, that would be an area. Saying that, going through the tough stretch here with losing games and not being able to score, hopefully we can find ways, and hopefully we can build guys back up. And as I said, Dakota, when he's coming back, we felt that was a positive injection again to our team.
Patrick, you sent Vasily down this morning. I think that has to do with making him eligible for the AHL playoffs. What's the plan now for him? He looked comfortable in the 3 games that he played. Is he going to be back up and in the lineup tomorrow night?
Yes, he's coming back up here. Very pleased. And I think that's the one thing that Höglander learned from us last year, the partnership and the trust factor, that we're doing this to help the players long-term NHL career. And with pods, it's not just the points what we're looking for. It's as Talk is talking about all the time, the wall plays, winning battles, getting the puck deep, the details of the games. And I've been really impressed with Podkolzin since he came up here and played those games on the road trip.
I talked to Rick about 10 days ago, and he had then sort of expressed that there had been a dip in the performance of the fourth line, and he talked about wanting a fourth line with identity. And I know DiGiuseppe scored last night, but that's kind of been the outlier in terms of providing offense. How closely did you guys look at altering the composition of your fourth line? And since you didn't make moves, what do you see as the identity of the group that you've got moving forward down the stretch and into the playoffs?
Yeah, you're right. I think that's something we definitely looked at and has been looking at the whole year. I think you could say that the fourth line was really good. Unfortunately, Höglander graduated out of the fourth line. So I think he was a big part of the fourth line where they were productive and scored. And I think with the injuries of Dakota has moved other players around. I still think having Teddy Bluger as your fourth line center is a luxury. And we all know that the matchups and what the center position does for a winning team is important. And that's where we now, hopefully can find that identity again of being hard to play against, play with speed. And I think that line here over the last stretch of games with Teddy, Sam Lafferty, and DiGiuseppe played pretty good.
I know you guys don't make rash decisions based on short-term results, but did the last 3 games impact your decision-making at all? Because I know it was a little bit tougher before that. Did this allow you to just be calm and not overreact?
No, I think we again, going back to when this season started, we want to see the progress of the players. And yeah, you're going through adversity and you're trying to find how I can help the coaches provide a better lineup every night. And we're talking to other teams and seeing what's available or not. And I don't think that's really changed their performance this week. I still think that if there was a player available for the right price, we would definitely have jumped in there.
Was it tough, though, to take a measured approach? I think I read that Jim has been involved in 34 trades on deadline day. You guys are an aggressive group by nature, and you don't often get these years where everybody's healthy and people are playing at such a high level. Was it tough to just be measured?
Well, I think you always, and I think that's what I've learned from Jim, you always want to be ahead of things. And part of it is that the discussions that I have with my staff and that I have with Jim and the coaches every day would allow us to quickly get into a trade if it happens. And so was it with Zadorov when we were able to pick him up. It was a quick one there. I think this is a balance of today's Vancouver Canucks and next year's and the following year's Vancouver Canucks. And I think this is a process that we started getting in here 2 years ago, and we're not finished. We're not satisfied. We're always trying to get better and improve. And would I like to have another player here today? Yeah, sure.
You talked about with your salary cap situation needing to make kind of player for player trades previously in the season. Did that aspect of the trade deadline increase the prices for you in a way that you weren't comfortable with, perhaps needing to include a contract going back or including a third team to get salary retention?
It definitely made it more complicated by bringing in players with salary. That means you're going to take out the player with salary or pay a third party. Yes.
There were a lot of trade rumors that went around leading into the deadline. How do you think that maybe impacted your roster, the players that maybe were named in those rumors? And is that something that you had to consider as you were going into the deadline?
Yeah, I feel bad for those players' names out there. I don't think that's the respect or integrity of the league, and sometimes it's just very unfortunate. There's a guessing game. It's not fair.
Patrick, you chatted a little bit about how teams like loading up like Vegas and Edmonton will make this a tougher division to play against. When you see some of those deals that Vegas and Edmonton and Winnipeg have made, what goes through your mind as a GM in the same division?
Well, he doesn't get it easier, that's for sure. But he also shows that you need to build up your kind of assets pools and picks or draft picks. And I think that's where we have started to do here and feeling more confident what we have in Abbotsford or unsigned players. And it also shows what the other teams around the league feels about our younger players. I mean, yeah, I could have parted ways with several younger players to get more established players in here if there was any salary cap restrictions. But we're excited about the young players that are getting closer to filling spots on the roster here moving forward.
Now that the deadline's passed, how are you feeling about this team as you gear up for playoffs?
Well, we're not there. We were gearing up for a big week here, gearing up for a big test against Winnipeg. Hopefully we'll learn something from last game when we played them. I know the players are having a day off today and a well-deserved one after a tough week here. But I know the coaches are in here working hard, and I know that they're going to have the team prepared for playing tomorrow, and that's their focus. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Hey, for Canucks media, as we take in, it's really Seinfeldian. It's a show about nothing. It's a day about nothing for the Vancouver Canucks.
I love the late answer there. Would I like to have a player here?
Well,
yes.
We finally, some 24 minutes into the presser, I think we finally got the most honest answer of the session. Would I have liked to have another player in here today? Yeah, sure. As mentioned, a bit of a long face with the, trying to put his best possible spin onto things. Let's go through some of the things that.
Can I just have an overarching thing? I was just chatting with Martin Ego.
Oh boy.
Kudos to Patrick Alvine. That is a much better speaker at the dais than we saw with the moment that he was unveiled as general manager of this team.
He's gotten better.
He's able to communicate a lot better now. Maybe it was a language thing. Whatever it is, that's a much better performance. Anyway, go on.
So Dakota Joshua expected back in 10 to 14 days. We did not have a timeline on the third line left winger, who was such a big part of that fantastic third line. And of course, the Vancouver Canucks' success until he left the lineup in that stupid fight against Mackenzie Entwistle, needless in Chicago, as he was playing his Mona Lisa game of the year, too.
Yeah.
He did, as we suspect, lean on the fact, and it is absolutely the truth, that the Canucks were early movers here, not just with Elias Lindholm on January 31st, but even going back to Nikita Zadorov earlier in the season. He said they wanted more speed in the lineup earlier in the season. Was a player out, player in world for Vancouver here at the deadline. Had about $1 million in cap space today after sending Podkolzin down. He did acknowledge they would have had to have had to pay brokers to retain salary or pay to get rid of players, things that he was not willing to do. He, of course, and this is from the GM playbook, when you do nothing on deadline day, you shout the young players on the farm who may have a chance now to come on up and contribute. On the defense side, that was Jet Wu, that was Cole McWard, that is Philip Johansson. On the offensive side of the ledger, that's Vasily Podkolzin. And he said he didn't want to give up. It was a long list. Wielander, Lekramaki, Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, Ratu, Baines, Podkolzin, even Max Sasson. So there you go. A lot of shouts to the Abbey Canucks. He said they were involved in the available wingers, weren't able to come to the deal. And then the other thing, and we wondered about this, Blake, he did doubt the quality of players. He said he didn't think a lot of quality players available. So it sounds like after Gensel went to Carolina, after Toffoli went to Winnipeg, after Zucker went to Nashville, that they just didn't fancy a lot of the other wingers that were out there.
And I don't think it's double speak to say that. I don't think you can, hem them in and say, well, we thought you said you were in on everybody. You kick tires on everything. You go and explore. It's called due diligence. It's what good managers do. And if you could find somebody on a lark who's willing to take back salary, make your life easier because of a salary going, then you go for a winger that you're not over the moon with, because it helps you in more than one way.
Now, one of the problems Alvine has is that Jim Rutherford does a lot of talking and is usually quite blunt. And so he did acknowledge that the last couple of weeks they identified areas of improvement, and he said they tried to play players in those spots perhaps higher than they were expected to. Now, this is Archie Baines and Vasily Podkolzin, who had gotten some plum assignments in the top 6 with the Vancouver Canucks. He did acknowledge the need is still there, and of course his president was saying the need was there as recently as the last 48 hours. They've been impressed with Podkolzin. He's going to be back up here and playing. When asked about the fourth line by our Jeff Patterson and how it's lost its identity and isn't really given the contribution that we saw earlier this season, he leaned on the fact that Nils Höglander had graduated up from the fourth line and that the Dakota Joshua injury has stressed and stretched some of the winger depth. He did say that having Teddy Bluger as a fourth center is a luxury. They do seem very much on message in a line that it's going to be Lindholm at center. They're going to stack the centermen, Miller, Pettersson, and Lindholm.
And that looks a lot better when Josh was back, but it's still a little thin.
And boo freaking who, he said, it's not fair and no respect and integrity that trade deadline becomes a guessing game and some of the names get leaked out there, which I don't know. Hockey still doesn't understand marketing. You know what? Rick Talkie yesterday in conversation with Kate Pettersson, Harmon Dial, and the people who are down in Vegas was asked about that. Hey, he said, you know what? I talked to Lindholm and I just told him, look, this is something that modern hockey players, modern professional athletes just have to deal with. There's going to be a lot of chatter. There's going to be a lot of noise. That's because of the interest in our game. And that's on you, the player, to deal with. Now, as for Lindholm,
other leagues,
it's
bask in the glow of these
the
rumors.
NBA is an open book.
Yeah.
And they're always available. So Lindholm's family is getting here, apparently.
It has arrived.
Or has arrived. Yeah. So, okay, you can understand. If he's played a little distracted, he got an assist last night, so he's on the board. Okay, Jeff Patterson of Rinkwide Vancouver, our Canucks reporter. Let's bring Jeff in. He's at Rogers Arena standing by.
Jeff, no trades, no Phil Kessel, no nothing. Just nothing. What'd you think?
Well, there was a lunch provided, which was nice of the Vancouver Canucks.
You guys got lunch?
We did. Yes, things are changing here on non-game days. So
was that ham and cheese, Jeff? Or
there was some ham and cheese. There was some sort of wrap as well. And hey, it all went down nicely. I was pretty pleased with it. And I got a cookie here.
Farhan didn't open any drinks, did he? We were worried about Farhan.
Security was keeping a very close eye on his consumption. Yes.
Good.
Well, they had nothing else to see on a day where the Canucks do nothing. Jeff, our Tim Hortons poll question today: are you disappointed that the Canucks didn't do more?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the reporter in me, absolutely. But just stepping back and looking at what this hockey club's accomplished. And so often we hear about teams rewarding the players for a job well done and supporting them in their efforts of furthering the cause. Forget what Edmonton and Vegas and Winnipeg and some of those other teams, you can't really forget it, but just in isolation, yeah, I would like the Canucks to have upgraded. I still think that there's, real questions about moving forward with the top 6 guys that are struggling to score goals. Now, terrific road trip, obviously. I know Patrick Alvine said that didn't change his view, and you can't think that short term, but man, there was a lot to like in the road trip, and particularly in the game against Vegas last night. So, there were some signs here that they're starting to figure out how to win low-scoring, tight-checking affairs, buckling down offensively, getting Carson Soucy back, all those things that Alvine talked about, I agree with. But you're moving forward now with Ilya Mikheyev, wherever he slots in his 33 games without a goal, and Pius Suter is up to 17 now without a goal, and Suter brings you lots of other things. But if those guys are going to slot in your top 6, there are going to be nights like last night where JT Miller doesn't have his best stuff, or even Elias Pettersson isn't going at the very top of his game. I mean, that's what I liked about the win last night was goals from third and fourth liners and a defenseman, and it was still enough to, win comfortably against a team like the Vegas Golden Knights. So I get it. I understand the pricing. I understand how the Canucks were up against it with the cap. But I guess I thought when all else failed that Phil Kessel would somehow, appear from behind door number 3. And even that not happening. And I don't know what he would have added, but I just thought that was the wild card that was going to go down for sure if nothing else happened for the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, and that's the one piece we didn't get to when we were unpacking Alvine, Blake. He cited roster complications, LTIR,
and playing the game the way
and
they
then
want to
got
play
around to the honest part, which was with the way how we want to play, he wasn't a fit.
Jeff, there were reports that his
us.
fitness was okay, but did you read between the lines and suss out that maybe what he was saying was the fitness wasn't okay, or just that he's as old as he is, and
Lost
this is
the
a tough
step,
league?
Can't forecheck as a winger.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy. He played all 82 for Vegas last year. He played 4 games in the playoffs. They felt that they had better options on their run to the Stanley Cup. And now he's a year removed from the game, from playing organized hockey, from even competing. You're truly a wild card. And I know that he's got a track record, and I'm sure he wanted to get back, 8 points away from 1,000. Like, it's just sitting there for him if he had been able to find a place. But, I thought it was curious, too, with Kessel. It sounded like it was the Canucks or bust. And as it turned out, I mean, that is, it wasn't like he was auditioning for all the teams in the National Hockey League. And yet he came in, he had the first go round. There was some video. It wasn't flattering, but at the same time, it was understandable for a guy. Like, it's one thing to skate on your own. It's another to, even at the AHL level, skate with guys that have been playing for 50 games. And he looked like he was struggling to catch his breath between shifts and those types of things. I don't know. I mean, they put a cloak of silence on him. We never saw more video of him after that. A couple of still pictures of him attending Abbotsford Canuck games. But, I don't know. Ultimately, how he ramped it up and how close he would have been to game readiness. But I don't have to worry about that now because that storyline has passed. And so, look, the Vancouver Canucks move forward, as Alvine mentioned a couple of times in his press conference, 89 points. He was clear to point that out. And their full credit for the 89 points that they have amassed. They are first place in their division, and they've done it with the group that they've got. It's just that some of their competitors around them certainly strengthen their roster, and not so much in terms of closing the gap over the regular season. The Canucks may have distanced, like last night with Edmonton losing in Columbus and the Canucks beating Vegas, like that might have been the night that the Canucks did enough to, clinch the Pacific ultimately. But you're going to run into some of those teams come playoff time, and they got better, and the Canucks ultimately did not.
Phil Kessel will be in Scottsdale by sundown if he's not already there.
Jeff, this team is still trying to outrun the Benning regime's mistakes. The cap space is a large part, a product of that.
Mikheyev is their mistake.
Mikheyev is their mistake, and that's a surprising mistake, to be honest, because I didn't hate the contract when that one was signed, but between those two things, this team's in a funny spot in that you expect this team to have cap space, given that they are just on the beginning of a competitive window. And yet, because of the mistakes of years gone by, they have the cap constraints of a team that's sort of trying to, withstand age and a long window that's been going on for some time. So they're acting like a team that's been contending for a while, even though they have not.
Yeah, and certainly all through last summer and earlier in the season, we heard an awful lot about a lack of flexibility and still trying to carve out that cap cushion. Now, the ghost of OEL is going to hang over this hockey club for a while still, and he does take up cap space, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I think, again, that's where Alvine, repeatedly pointed to the fact that they got through this deadline without parting with any of those assets that he could have parlayed, whether it was Bud Colson or Höglander or any of the recent first rounders. He could have done that, but he didn't want to because he wanted to do things with an eye to the future. And I do think that, and I mean, we talked about this at length, guys, for much of the season and certainly in the last week, getting the cost certainty of Elias Pettersson locked up, I think allows them to recognize that they're a little ahead of schedule this year. Nobody had them pegged to be, sitting with 89 points and first in the Pacific at this stage of the season. But now with Demko still under contract for a couple of more years, Hughes on one of the best value contracts in the National Hockey League right now, like there is a window that I think you line up, you take your best swing this year, see where it lands you, get some of that experience that Alvine talked about. But there is a window of opportunity here for the next couple of seasons with this core group now that they know that Elias Pettersson is going to be around for the long haul.
He acknowledged, Alvine did, that there was areas of improvement, that top six winger. I think that was clear based on what he said and what, of course, Jim Rutherford has said over the last couple days. It sounds very much based on that answer from Farhan Lalji's questions about being involved on the wingers and Toffoli specifically, that they took a run at Gensel, they took a run at Toffoli, and maybe even took a run at Jason Zucker. And then he mentioned quality players. He didn't think there were a lot of quality players. So it sounds to me like they took the run at those three wingers, and when they fell off the board, they weren't that interested in some of the other wingers that were out there. Is that how you read it?
Yeah, I would imagine that every team has, they identify their A, B, and C targets, and I don't think the Canucks would be any different there. I guess the question is how many go on to D and E. Was there interest in a guy like Anthony Duclair, who, on a bad San Jose team was up to 16 goals, and I think he had 5 in his last 5 games, was kind of heating up again. Low cost acquisition. Tampa ultimately was willing to get in there, but I did wonder if that was a player that, if those other ones fell through, was that the kind of player that perhaps they would have some interest in? We'll never know because Alvine wasn't telling tales on names. But yeah, I mean, look, there's enough intel out there that certainly they were in deep on Gensel. And then I think the asking price got just too ridiculous for them. And whether it was Höglander, whether it was Podkolzin, whether it was one of those recent first rounders, they just didn't want to go down that road. Toffoli, that one is tough. I mean, there was just such a natural fit here with the players that he had played with. A right shot guy that scores goals, could step in on the power play, all those types of things. And then the acquisition cost ultimately. And then when you saw that, New Jersey was retaining on top of that, like that just felt like, why couldn't they make that deal? But we know that,
they still couldn't. They still couldn't make that deal. Like they still need more space. Yeah,
exactly. And depending on, I suppose you can move it. We saw some 2027 draft picks move. So teams are touching those stockpiles now. Whatever the case, Tyler Toffoli is a Winnipeg Jet. And I think that's a great acquisition for them. I liked the Jets before that, and to grab Tyler Toffoli. So, Zucker was never a guy for me. I know he had 27 goals last year, but boy, that looks like the outlier now when you look at his recent performance over the last bunch of years. 32, not big, not physical, only 9 goals. Like Mikheyev's got more goals this season than Jason Zucker does, and now people were thinking that somehow he might be the answer, and not much of a playoff track record either, and has only been out of the first round once. So that was never a guy that I thought was a fit for the Vancouver Canucks or what they needed. And ultimately, if they had a short list and they couldn't realize anybody on that list, then I suppose they were prepared to stand pat, and that's ultimately what they've done here.
Yeah, the other takeaway, Jeff, is when he listed off the young assets and just said he wasn't prepared to, they weren't all in here. I think it's pretty clear that Patrick Alvine, drew a line, and that
because of the quality, they weren't all in.
Yeah,
I think even for like if Gensel's got term or something like that, then I think you would have seen them possibly offer up those things. But where do you think those players are in terms of their evolution, Jeff?
But Colson's going to get a chance here. That much is clear. Maybe even Baines is going to get a chance, and in part because of no acquisition and no Kessel.
Yeah,
right?
and the kids
Right,
are
and
being happy.
And look, Aramaki, I mean, possibly as early as next year, but when you get Elias Pettersson's extension on the books, and we'll see what happens with Phil Hronek, obviously Lindholm, they've got a decision to make there, and if he walks, then they've got some money there to play with. But guys on ELCs and Willander in a couple of years' time, I think, absolutely golden for the Vancouver Canucks. They're going to need those players, not just to fill out spots in the roster, but to come and play and contribute. And so I can understand why they were reluctant ultimately to part with those kinds of players. And look, Vasily Podkolzin has had 3 pretty strong games. Now, there hasn't been a bottom line, but, I think he's looked stronger and better with each outing, and certainly has looked comfortable in this spin so far. And I was glad to hear that Alvine was willing to tell us, flat out, he's coming back up. They're not going to tinker with a winning lineup right now. I want to see him play in a game against a team like the Winnipeg Jets. You remember the last time the Jets were here, Adam Lowry absolutely demolished Nils Aman, and Dakota Joshua wasn't playing that night. Like, I want the Canucks to have some guys that can offer some pushback and resistance. And so I think Podkolzin, great opportunity for him against Winnipeg. Colorado's coming in here on Wednesday. Like, the start of this homestand, those are tough games, but they also, guys, they start to get a break now. Winnipeg's in Seattle tonight before they arrive here. Colorado's in Calgary on Tuesday before they arrive here. So the next 2 opponents, good teams, but they're both on the back end of backs, and this is where the schedule now starts to work in the Canucks' favor, right?
Yeah.
9-game homestand, 11 of the next 14 are at Rogers Arena. So if
multiple days off before games during this whole
season,
and practice.
Yeah. Well, and guys, the proof's in the pudding there. Like, they're 4-1-1 in their last 6 games. They haven't had a back-to-back. They haven't left the Pacific time zone. The schedule has slowed down for them, and as a result, they're starting to look like the Canucks of long stretches of earlier this season. Like, I do think that when you think of how bad they were in Seattle that night, that was the end of that stretch of 10 games and 17 nights. Like, it's just impossible. You're asking too much of these athletes to be able to perform at their highest level. The schedule softened a little bit, and they have been able, get Carson Soucy back, obviously. That helps the defensive structure. And to hear Alvine offer a timeline on Dakota Joshua, that's the first time beyond, it's always been week to week. Unfortunately, it's 10 days to 2 weeks still. So some point on this homestand, but not in the early games, certainly not the first couple, but he's getting there, and they will certainly welcome him back, obviously. And then we'll get a look at, what Rick Tocchet's thinking, his deployment, who's going to be on that third line. Is it Lindholm? Do they try to rekindle the magic with Bluger? I would think that Lindholm's going to get an opportunity between Garland and Joshua when they get their healthy bodies back.
Yeah, and you do wonder where Lindholm is going to be at psychologically, emotionally, after hearing his name as a potential trade rumor with that 3-way with Boston and Pittsburgh. I saw Alvine was harsh on the messenger, not necessarily on their.
Well, was that on the media or was that on the other team that leaked it? I got that.
Well,
I took it as that.
Yeah. I mean, look, it was either an agent or a team.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it comes from within that sanctum. So we'll see how he does. Apparently his family's now arrived. So perhaps he can get down to brass tacks. Had an assist last night. We'll see if that can continue. Just the final trades are trickling in here. Capo Kakinen traded from San Jose to New Jersey, so the Devils acquired 2 goaltenders.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Will San Jose win a game the rest of the year? They do have Chicago twice, but good God, what is that lineup going to look like down the stretch? Jeff, were you surprised no character guys like a Pat Maroon and Eric Johnson, like an experienced Stanley Cup champion type low-cost guy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I asked the question about the fourth line just because 10 days ago in the morning skate in Seattle, I mean, I felt like that was a bit of a cry for help from Rick Tocchet, that he didn't like what he was seeing from his fourth line. And Patrick Alvine's not wrong. Like, at times, the fourth line, whether it was Höglander early in the season or even Kuzmenko, when they dropped it, like, there was a scoring profile on that fourth line and the potential with matchups that, you might get some goals that way. But when it's Bluger between Lafferty and DiGiuseppe, and I get that DiGiuseppe scored last night, first time he has scored in an NHL goalie since October 27th. These are rare, obviously. And I can't sit here. I follow this team on a daily basis. I don't know what the identity ultimately of that fourth line is. They're not overly physical. Lafferty's got some speed. DiGiuseppe battles, but he's not an intimidating presence that way, and neither is Bluger. So they didn't do anything. And I'd be curious ultimately, and we'll get a chance tomorrow at the morning skate, I guess, to talk to Rick Tocchet. But 10 days ago, it sounded like he was banging the drum for some improvement there. I kind of figured at the very least that, one of those low cost, maybe a guy that's been there and done it a little bit, knows his role. I don't know that Pat Maroon necessarily was the guy, but that sort of profile, obviously. And again, they're electing to move forward here. So let's see what happens. But, to me, usually in the playoffs, Edmonton goes out and they pick up Corey Perry. Like, there's a guy that, again, I'm not saying that he was the right fit for the Canucks, but the experience, the championship pedigree, but also just the it factor of, willing to go to the greasy areas to stick you and glove you, and like the kinds of things that you have to have some guys that are willing to mix it up a little bit in the playoffs. And again, I don't know what the identity of that fourth line is, but I do agree that on this road trip, at the very least, everybody has kind of been in lockstep. And, to get a goal from DiGiuseppe last night to extend a lead from 1-0 to 2-0, absolute gravy for the Vancouver Canucks. So maybe I don't think the floodgates are open for Phil just because he got one, but it was a good step in the right direction. And hopefully there's a little bit more offense.
They need to make Podkolzin rageful. They need to get that big body angry.
And when Joshua comes back, maybe it is as simple as he drops down and they give him a run on the fourth line and just ask him to be the bull in the china shop kind of guy. So again, we'll see what happens here. They got to get players healthy. Like, that's the thing is, right? Everybody talks about, when Joshua gets back. Well, it's a contact sport. There's no guarantee that somebody else isn't going to be out of the lineup, but wishful thinking and fingers crossed that they've had a pretty healthy season. They've got a couple of guys nicked up right now, but absolutely, they will welcome Dakota Joshua back whenever he gets the green light.
It's woulda, coulda, shoulda, but of course, it's not just the actions of a general manager that affect the club. Their inactions sometimes can affect the club. Are the Canucks guilty of not moving Mikheyev sooner, before it got to these depths for him of 30-plus games without a goal? And should they have just gone to Tyler Myers and said, Tyler, we need your LTIR space. Can you shut her down here until we get another injury or be back for the playoffs? Those two scenarios, Jeff.
Yeah, the Myers would first. I just don't think you can do that to players. Like, I know that teams use the LTIR situation, but if you got a healthy player, he wants to play. And Tyler Myers may be the most popular guy in that Canucks locker room. Like, I think that you heard Quinn Hughes speak out last year about the way that Tanner Pearson's situation went down. I think you would hear some squawking if you had a fully healthy Tyler Myers and he was just being asked to stay in a storage closet somewhere out of sight, out of mind. It'd have to be a big, tall storage closet for him.
Robidas Island, Jeff. He would need his own island.
So that one, I think that's a difficult scenario. But Mikheyev, look, I just don't think anybody from the player to the coaching staff and management thought that it would get to the depth of the struggles. And, again, the same things that I just said about DiGiuseppe in the fourth line. Like, were there some baby steps on the road trip? Yeah, but the bar is so low. And I think we have to be careful in this market, guys, to throw a ton of praise and a bunch of flowers. Mikheyev, a good game last night. The bar, again, has been dropped through the floor, that when he's noticeable, it does stand out because he's had such a long run of games where he's been so ineffective here. And I am curious, like, okay, let's just play the game of when they get fully healthy. We just talked about Podkolzin. Like, do you give him an opportunity higher in the lineup? Does he drop down to the fourth line? What do you do with Ilya Mikheyev? And it's hard for me to wrap my head around, like, where is he best slotted on a team that has designs on certainly winning a playoff round. And I think they've got hopes of going deeper than that in the playoffs, but just way too many nights of too much ineffectiveness.
It's fourth line. That's all he deserves right now. You got to score your way out.
It's the only place you can play him right now.
I know, but then he doesn't fall into any sort of identity for me. Like, if you're looking for a fourth line, he's not physical.
Yeah.
And there isn't any sort of scoring touch there. I mean, there's too many guys whose penalty killing utility seems to keep them, on the fringes. And that shouldn't be enough, in the National Hockey League. And again, I would have liked to have brought in just somebody that could have sparked a little more internal competition, perhaps, and just, shown some guys that their spots can't be taken for granted. So
Brandon Duhaime for a 3rd-round pick.
I was
asked
all
you
aboard.
yesterday, would you have gone a second for Brandon Duhaime? I mean, I wasn't willing to go there yesterday, but I look at what didn't happen today, and I think to myself, really steep price for a guy who plays 10 minutes and doesn't
what's his
score.
cap hit, though?
Oh, it's 1-1 or something like
So
that.
they
It's
would have
affordable.
maybe had room for him?
Yeah, I think they would have had room
Maybe.
for him. I mean, Minnesota could have retained on that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Or you find a broker on a small cost. Anyways, all right, Jeff. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll let you get going here. You had the big night here last night with Urf Ghaffar and Farhan Lalji and his Exploding Beers.
And a 9-game homestand means you're going to be in that building a lot going forward.
You're going to see a lot of Rogers Arena going forward. Thank you for this, my friend, and we will catch up on Monday.
All right, guys. Sounds good. Thanks.
Jeff Patterson, our Canucks reporter of Rinkwide Vancouver. You can catch him tomorrow night after the Canucks Winnipeg Jets game.
Fleshing out a couple of the points we were making about this 9-game homestand. We mentioned the days off before games. 9 games, 5 of them have multiple days off before them. So 5 times in this 9-game homestand, you can give the team a day off and have at least one practice before you play the game. Like, how much better is that for this team?
Rick Tocchet is over.
Salivating.
Practice.
And also about the exodus of players in some of these crappy teams.
We're going to have a great practice today.
The Canucks are feast or famine in the rest of their schedule. They're either playing really good. There's not much middle class left on the Canucks schedule. It's either really good teams, LA and Calgary.
Yeah.
But there's Anaheim, there's Montreal, there's Buffalo, there's the Capitals, who I guess are middle class. There's 2 against the Arizona Coyotes.
People were expecting more of a sell-off from Washington.
It's true. They kind of held it stand, but Montreal, the Arizona Coyotes, the Ducks, and the Sabres. I mean, that's almost enough points there to get the Canucks home.
I'm sorry. We were just laughing here. Blake and I have been taking in some of the GM press conferences and settings from around the league today. Now the Canucks are at home, so Patrick Alvine is there at the podium with the nice backdrop at Rogers Arena in the media room. Brad Treliving of the league
stuffed in a closet in Montreal.
The Montreal Canadiens obviously did not provide the Toronto Maple Leafs general manager a room to conduct his press conference. Looked like it was done in the lower concourse, the event level concourse, with a ratty old banner behind him. Then there's Steve Yzerman with Detroit. I would say in Detroit, but I'm not sure if he is in Detroit.
Or a minimum security prison.
He is not even gracing the Detroit media with his physical presence. He's doing it on Zoom with a white wall behind him.
Yeah, not all is created
equal. A
equal.
reluctant speaker at the best of times, Stevie Y. He has absolutely gone to the bargain room to do the presser for a Detroit Red Wings team that, unless I'm mistaken, did they do absolutely nothing today as well?
They're very quiet. I did not see the wing wheel
a lot of
places.
Seinfeld around the NHL today. Shows about nothing.
Yeah.
Only first round picks to go today, Blake, unless we got a real stunner here that we haven't yet heard of, are the first round picks, the one first round pick that Vegas sent San Jose.
Those are the only first round picks traded today?
And Edstrom, the center they moved, was a first round pick last year.
Yeah.
But in terms of guaranteed first round picks, Detroit did make they shipped Klim Kostin to San Jose.
The takeaway from that is if you had
picks weren't a thing today.
If you had
one
cap
big
space,
blockbuster.
if you had cap space, it was a buyer's market.
Yep.
It was.
Well, for sure.
The costs were not high as long as you could afford the player.
If you had cap space.
Yeah.
If you had cap space, like Zucker for a 6th, like Dumba for, what did that wind up being?
Like a pick swap.
A pick swap. I mean, good God.
Yeah. Like you could get talent. You could get, like, again, Zucker and Dumba are not what they once were, but they're NHL quality depth players for nothing as long as you could afford them. Crazy.
Wow. Okay, let's get to today's menu. It is brought to you by Greta and Greta's a fantastic place to watch.
It's less a menu, more a receipt. It's the bill at the end of the meal rather than the menu at the outset.
Except we're charging them for a show about nothing. Dive into the ultimate Mario Day celebration, a thrilling tournament March 10th. Put your gaming skills to the test. Single elimination showdown. Chance to win a grand prize of $1,000 cash. Whether you're a seasoned Mario expert, just love a good challenge. Event is perfect for gamers of all levels. Action-packed afternoon of nostalgia, competition, and fun. Tickets $20 at gretabar.com or $25 at the door. Special $5.50 Regretta drink specials. Tickets include a house beer, a Greta burger, and entry to the tournament with game card. Your tournament starts at 4 p.m. See you March 10th, Sunday, at Greta 50 West Cordova. So we just talked to J-Pat about nothing. I mean, there's one thing Jeff Patterson can do.
Oh, he can talk about
that
nothing.
guy can fill.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And we just spent 20 good minutes talking about nothing with J-Pat, and nobody, and I mean nobody, talks about nothing better than Jeff Patterson. We'll get to the people and your comments on nothing coming up. Onto the people we go. We had designs on Patrick Johnston on the show today. I think I even teased him yesterday, but SFA has happened. So you know what? Patrick's got Canucks conversation to do with David Quadrelli today. So we'll let Patrick have his say on nothing, catch up with him next week after the game against.
Let's hear from the people next.
The Jets. We'll go to the people. It's coming up on Sekeres and Price. Park is the official casino resort of the Vancouver Canucks, and Sekeres and Price, we're heading there. Yeah, March 13th. Join us for a live show at BC Kitchen in advance of the game against Colorado. You get 15% off the game day menu at BC Kitchen with a game ticket, $6 happy hour specials at Center Bar Park, just steps away from Rogers Arena. We'll see you on March 13th.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Sekeres and Price, we're back here at the Go-Goat Sports Studio at the Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. The Vancouver Canucks do absolutely nothing on trade deadline day 2024. They don't consummate a trade. They don't find they don't sign Phil Kessel. They paper Vasily Podkolzin down to Abbotsford, so he's eligible for the Calder Cup playoffs, but he will continue to play here for the Vancouver Canucks.
That's your deadline acquisition there.
Of Dakota Joshua. Our top story today, if you missed it earlier, by Mr. Lube, capped out, missed out. Gensel to Carolina, Toffoli to Winnipeg, Zucker to Nashville, and that was that. The Canucks didn't see a lot of quality out there, according to Patrick Alvine. Weren't willing to give up young assets, didn't have the cap space to do much, would have required retention, brokerage, add it all up, and it amounts to a big zero. Nothing on trade deadline.
And the danger is that everybody else around them improving, including, like, best case scenario, I think we're still of this mind, are we not, that if the Vancouver Canucks can win the conference, they'd probably, if they could have their pick, probably face the Nashville Predators, despite the hot streak of the Preds of late. Well, the Preds got better. Preds ended up acquiring talent.
I think I would prefer to play. I know, are they on a Pacific spot right now? I didn't check. I think I would prefer to play the Kings.
Really?
Well,
goaltending?
Yeah.
Goalies can steal.
Saros has a goaltender that could steal a series. So if I had my druthers, I would play the King. As boring as they are,
I can hear that.
As boring as they are, and as much as they handle the Canucks here at Rogers Arena a week ago Thursday.
These fans wait 10 years for the playoffs. They got to face the 1-3-1 in the first round.
Yeah.
Like, whatever happened to the run and gun first round? You know, like, the first round's the best round of the playoffs. We talk about this all the time.
Kings won 2 cups with some of the most impotent teams to ever lift the chalice, and they're even worse.
They're way worse offensively now. Yeah. Ay, ay, ay.
We going to the people?
Let's go to the people.
To the people we go.
A presentation of Grey Clips. Grey Clips is the official hair salon of the NHL and Monster Jam. And things happen at Monster Jam. A lot more than...
I went to Monster Jam a couple of years ago.
Yeah. A lot more than this trade deadline. Things happen there.
Oh, lots of stuff happening at Monster Jam.
Yeah, you will not be disappointed. Your time is valuable. Use the Grey Clips check-in app. See the wait time. Check in on your phone and get your haircut when you want. Check out greyclips.com for the salon nearest you.
And they're all Canadian-owned and operated here in the Lower Mainland.
So
we got an intro coming, Grady, or we no?
No. Well, we're al fresco today.
I thought we were put some bells and whistles on it here. Eason. Oh,
you want lipstick on this pig?
I mean, somebody has to do it. We are dealing with a pig here, Blake Price. We're dealing with a big fat nothing on trade deadline.
Tyler, can't believe
so
they
excited, had so many designs, what we were going to do.
Shush. Tyler, can't believe they couldn't snag Toffoli at the price tag he went for. The Canucks really going to run McCabe and Suter in the top 6 and expect them to produce for a deep playoff run.
They're not going to run McCabe in the top 6,
Suter,
but they have no choice on Pius Suter.
Pius Suter, does have a scoring rate in his National Hockey League career that is commensurate with the top 6 forward. You could make the argument he doesn't necessarily fit the profile of your playoff performer, but we'll see.
Let's get to some comments on today's poll question. Tim Horton's poll question. We are asking you, are you disappointed with what the Canucks didn't do here? Are you disappointed that the Canucks were so quiet at the trade deadline? Dillfish Nate says, we already got Lindholm and Zadorov, so other than Las Vegas, we've done more than anyone else. Perry says, they must be confident their depth in Abbey or maybe a college signing. Good shout here on the college signing, Perry. Now, very rarely do you see a college signing in that first year affect a Stanley Cup playoff game. That's a pretty high bar.
Do you mean one still to be signed? Is
right.
Well, yeah. Unlikely.
Well, and of course, they missed the deadline, so they, in a lot of cases, can't play in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But it may be a little more difficult for the Canucks, who have had some success with college signees. Akito Hirose, Colt McWard have both played NHL games.
They like back Sasson.
Yeah, Sasson has a chance here. But, the Canucks aren't the gaping hole of opportunity that they have been over previous years, right? Like, one of the things that attracted previous college signees with the Vancouver Canucks is, look at all the opportunity I have. They don't have a lot of good players in my position or on my handedness at this spot. And of course, have been able to guarantee these college signees that they get into NHL games, make some of that big money, and burn, in some cases, burn a year off the ELC. So we'll see if they're active in the college sign. I mean, they're going to take their crack at some of these guys. We'll see if they're successful this year. It may be a little more difficult.
Look, if the Canucks are on the bubble for the playoffs, if they're looking like they are the road team in the playoffs, I think there's more room for anger in the inbox. But right now, I don't see a lot of it. Trevor says, I think disappointed is a good word choice. Obviously would have preferred they added, but I'm not angry or frustrated to go into the playoffs with this lineup. From Jim, not so much. We shall see how this plays out. I am pleased that we didn't sell the ranch.
Yep. And hear that school of thought. In fact, the poll question, last I checked, 30% of folks saying no, they're not disappointed. And many of them citing the fact that they didn't want the Canucks to go all in this year. They didn't want to see some of these young players traded out. Hell, 45% it's running right now. No, Blake, not disappointed. Now, again, some of that is defense mechanism. There's a lot of people who woke up this morning and were going to love whatever the Canucks did.
But there's also a little bit of logic here. If you're on the on the bubble or you're a bottom 4 seed,
they're not.
You want to be better. You need to be better, clearly, because you haven't had the season that has put you near the top of the league. If you're at the top of the league, you can make the argument,
and Blake,
you're the team you want to be.
And Blake, if we were talking about a team that had a recent Stanley Cup appearance or victory or had been on postseason runs in the past, I would agree more with you. But this is for the most part, new playoff team. Again, some of the core players have some experience, albeit in a much different environment of the bubble in Edmonton in 2020. So, for my money, and particularly when you look at the ranks and at wing most acutely, this was a team that needed depth. And this was a team that has missed an opportunity today or over the last couple of days to bring in another depth piece to help things out in the playoffs.
Okay, so
I would have put them a little closer to that team fighting for a playoff spot or fighting to see if they could get home ice, and that more so than in the camp of an established postseason team.
A lot of the tropes were used about acquisitions earlier in the season, about Joshua coming back and Myers coming back. Those are our deadline deals. You know what? One I can accept, though, it's a spin, but it's one that actually makes a lot more sense than the other ones. Carson Soucy. Carson Soucy had only played 20 of the 60 games this season.
18-3-2 with Soucy in the lineup this year.
And doesn't he feel like a new player? Like, we barely know Carson Soucy.
They have been very good since he's returned. They have given up very little defensively.
So
Tocchet is praising their play defensively.
Is that the one spin that actually kind of hits because he's barely played this season?
Yep. No, that one has some credence.
Yeah.
That one has some credibility. Earl says really wanted one heavy experienced winger. Not much to complain about, though. Did you read the one from Puzzle Guys?
No.
Not exactly thrilled going into the playoffs with two guys in the top 6 who don't score. Also shocked they couldn't make some depth adds. And what the hell was the whole Kessel thing about? Perplexing, to say the least. I just think they looked at him and thought he can't play anymore.
I saw somebody on the YouTube comments suggest, well, what about an assistant coach? If that's not going to happen, but I mean, could he be signed as an advisor? Like, he's got the 3 cups. Apparently he's smashing in the room. Like, honestly, apparently he is
director of good vibes.
He's totally. Like, I wonder if there's something to that. Now they've got cup finalists around in the Twins and that sort of thing. Like, but you got a cup winner there who apparently does demand. Like, you've seen a lot of memes out there. Kessel on the bench talking to coaches. His intensity is there. I wonder if there's something to be gained from having him
I
around.
want to read this one. This is at Van Kid 42. The first one is pre-deadline. The second one is after the deadline.
Okay.
Pre-deadline. Alvine just went from being GM of the year candidate to being a nothing GM. Your roster is not a cup contender. Your top addition has maybe played 3 good games with this team. If you don't add more depth or another score, we are out in the first round. Then the deadline passes. Are you disappointed? Given that they have the best team in the number of years. Exactly. I didn't care they didn't get a top player, but you needed depth. They didn't even get that done. All they want is a first-round playoff run. This team could have been so much better with the UFAs they have next year. They will not be as good. What a shame by this management team.
The UFAs.
Loud, boisterous.
The UFAs.
Is there a vein of truth there? Is there a through line there that, look at who's off, look at who's free this summer. Can you bring them all back? Look at where the money is going to be spent next year. More on PD, more on Roenick, more on Ekman Larson.
Folks, if you had told Canucks fans in late September, before they'd stood on the ice, boy, they are really going to miss Ian Cole and Tyler Myers and Sam Lafferty and Ted Bluger.
Well, and Dakota Joshua.
Yeah, and Dakota Joshua, sure. If you had said that in late September, people would have looked at you with googly eyes going, sorry, what now? They're going to really miss all of those players? Hey, they did a great job of selecting. These players were almost scrap heap kind of players.
Yep.
Signed.
Let's go to Grady for some YouTube comments. Grady, what you got?
Yes, let me just pull this up here.
Thought you were ready.
Way to be ready.
Yeah.
Joey Killer, the killer. I am disappointed, but I'm also happy that the team didn't trade Hoglander or the prospects. And he talked about he's disappointed in not bringing any reinforcements. Stanley Chow, it's not every season our top players are having career years. Definitely should have leveraged assets for a run this year to show up our depth.
See, the top players, I think, can have more of these years. It's more that you're not capitalizing on your role players having career years. To me, that's the...
And you're going to need those Bud Colsons, those Baines, and those sorts of guys are going to have to be good NHL players.
Well, and especially with OEL buyout coming up here in the next few years.
Yeah.
Captain Canuck, he says, when the Canucks have a 2-0 lead, we need to play more defensively. Have a third guy back, Hughes, Hronek, not pinching. What else can we do when you play a tighter defensive game?
Yeah,
last four games
have been very tight.
Yeah, Mike says we should try Hoglander, Pettersson, Garland, Mikheyev, Miller, Besser, Joshua, Lindholm, Suter. Garland can score.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if we're not getting the magic back with Bluger and Joshua on that third line, then I'm fine with a Garland showcase in the top 6. It hasn't worked before. It hasn't worked with those players before, at least not with Pettersson before. But I would rather see him there than Ilya Mikheyev. And frankly, until Vasily Podkolzin and Archie Baines earn a little more, I think I'd rather see Garland as well.
I like this one from Mike. What about Podkolzin and Mikheyev spot with Miller and Besser? Maybe he can work his way up to that.
Yeah, I mean, right now that'd be a hope bet.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're going to have to try some of this. Yeah.
His puck pursuit last night was really good.
So let's go back and see some reaction here from prior to the deadline and prior to the day about nothing here with the Vancouver Canucks. We asked on the Tim Hortons poll question Thursday, do the Canucks have to keep up with the Western Conference arms race? 56% said yes, Blake. So there was split there too, much like very similar to the results we're seeing today about disappointed. Shane, within reason, a hockey trade now. He liked Lawson Krause, your boy Grady. He liked Nick Bjugstad by moving out Elias Lindholm. Jared said, keep up. No, they were out in front, but it would be nice to add depth. Maybe another defenseman, a beefy winger. Max says they paid 5 assets for Lindholm. Their cupboard is bare. They're not winning the cup this year in any case. Bigger need is to address Mikheyev, PDG, and Pod's roster spot. Should be an off-season event. And then Matt says, have to? No, lest we forget who drove all the NHL trade activity from September to February. Do they need serviceable depth and size? Yes. Should they break the bank? It depends on what they are getting. So very much in line, I think, with the reaction that we're seeing here today.
Overall, I don't think there's a ton of panic. I think people would have liked, rather than not, had something to show for the day. But I ultimately don't know that I've seen. I think it's the fringe that are most upset, but it's the fringe. I think there's enough patience out there that I've seen that people think, I think it'll be okay.
A lot of people on YouTube don't think the Canucks are tough enough for a playoff run. Syndicat says, I don't see the Canucks making it out of the second round, TBH.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough. Yeah. Even if you get a easy first round series, and
I don't think there is one, but
I'm not sure there is one. Yeah. But let's say you get a Nashville team that isn't going like they're going right now, and that's over early, or you get an LA Kings team that just can't score and doesn't get goaltending.
Mike on Twitter saying maybe we should throw our games versus Seattle and Calgary. Allow them to float out.
You're getting one of Vegas or Edmonton in the next round, presuming you finish first in Pacific. So that's going to be hard, and then you're almost certain to get a Colorado, Winnipeg, or a Dallas coming out of the Central, which. That could be a hell of a so rounds 2 and 3 are going to be extraordinarily difficult.
Well, I think
especially for a team that doesn't have a lot of Stanley Cup playoff experience.
I think you're underestimating what JT Miller is going to look like in the playoffs. I think he's going to be an animal. Yeah. I think Joshua and I think Nikita Zadorov's going to think this is my key to my next contract is being an animal in the playoffs. Well, and that could be for good and bad, right? Like that could be an unfocused Nikita Zadorov, but I think there's more toughness in the lineup than people.
And even Ian Cole, like this guy's won the cup. He's played a lot of playoff games. Carson Soucy's played playoff.
I think
games.
Red's going to be waved in a lot of these veterans' faces, and they're going to react.
Well, some of them are playing for contracts.
Yeah,
too.
That's right.
Lastly, Elias Lindholm finding his game won 73% of the votes in our Thursday poll question. Which would you rather see, a trade for Gensel or Lindholm finding his game?
No, they got their wish.
People are comfortable with Lindholm. They got their wish. They just need him to find his game. They weren't for trading all sorts of assets for Jake Gensel. That's going to be a wrap on To the People We Go. And on the program, lastly, though, and we mentioned this yesterday, we're going to have more information coming up for you in the days ahead. But Saturday, April 20th, 12 noon to 5 p.m. at the Hollywood Theater on West Broadway in Kitsilano, a special tribute to our late friend, Jason Botchford. Bro, Do Your Playoffs, a media event celebrating the life and legacy of Jason goes from noon to 5. We're going to be sharing memories, celebrating our city's return to the hockey playoffs. We'll take some audience questions. We'll hear from the Botchford family, and all of it in the name of raising money for the BC Mental Health Foundation. We will have ticket information available to you soon, and we'll be telling you more about who will be involved on the stage show. We know the matinee is going to play.
Yeah, we'll listen to some live music too. Yeah.
So we will get you more information on that in the days ahead. But save the date, April 20th, the afternoon, 12 to 5 p.m. at the Hollywood Theater on West Broadway in Kitts. Thanks for joining us today on NHL Trade Deadline, a special Sekeres Price show. The Vancouver Canucks do absolutely nothing.
Are you going to crack those yellow dogs, or you just going to let them sit
We
there?
are indeed.
Okay.
It's Friday.
It's time.
Rink wide tomorrow, folks. Make sure you listen to Jeff Patterson, see if the Canucks can start this 9-game homestand and stuff.
We've earned this.
What that beautiful sound.
2+
And
hours.
Look, Farhan, we did it without spraying it everywhere.
The studio has not been showered in beer.
Cheers, all.
Cheers, everybody. Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.